Chapter 53. Becoming a saint. After the award ceremony finished, the students at the sports field gradually began to leave, dispersing until there was absolutely nobody left. During the past 3 days of fighting against the magical beasts in the forest, almost all of the students had numerous injuries. Now that the award ceremony was over, everyone returned back to their own dorms to treat their injuries. The only people left in the sports field were the completely uninjured students that had given up on the task ages ago. However, after experiencing this event, Jian Chen's and Tai Ta's reputations in Kargath Academy had reached its peak form. They had already become the greatest stars in the academy. No matter where one went, their names could be heard being discussed. Jian Chen and Tai Ta, as well as Jianghu's group of 3, bid each other farewell, and returned to their own dorms to treat their injuries as well. In the center of the academy was a tall tower around 100 square meters large. Vice Headmaster Chang Baiyan was currently respectfully standing in the center of a room on the top of the tower. In front of him sat Kargath Academy's headmaster, lazily sitting in front of the office desk, with a smiling expression. His profound gaze also had hints of happiness and excitement reflected in them. Ah, Baiyan, it seems that a genius really has appeared in Kargath Academy this time. The headmaster excitedly said with a smile. Vice Headmaster Chang Baiyan nodded and smiled back. Headmaster, that is not correct. This time, Kargath Academy has more than one genius, rather there are 2. These 2 are Changyang Xiang Tian and Tai Ta. The headmaster shook his head and smiled. No, it isn't wrong. Tai Ta's talent is definitely extremely high, and he also has godly strength. However, compared to Changyang Xiang Tian, he still has a long ways to go. Vice Headmaster Chang Baiyan was surprised at this response, and he asked doubtfully, Headmaster, why do you say that? The headmaster let out a long sigh and said, You definitely cannot underestimate Changyang Xiang Tian. He is quite a complicated person. No wonder the old fellow at Changyang clan kept praising him. Actually, yesterday afternoon, after I had heard the news that Changyang Xiang Tian and Tai Ta had killed a Class 2 magical beast in the 3rd region, I personally rushed over myself to secretly watch them. Although those 2 aren't saints yet, their combat abilities cannot be underestimated. Especially Changyang Xiang Tian, with just a broken iron rod, he was pretty much invincible in the 3rd region. Not only are his movements incomparably fast, they are also extremely precise. His battle experience is not anything alike to a 15-year-old youth's. On the contrary, it seems as if he's a person that has fought 100 battles already. The Class 2 monster cores in the 2's hands were pretty much completely killed by Changyang Xiang Tian alone. Tai Ta was simply involved in the fights. Hearing this, the Vice Headmaster Chang Baiyan gave an incredulous look and asked, Headmaster, is Changyang Xiang Tian really as formidable as you say? The headmaster nodded and said, If I hadn't personally witnessed it, I wouldn't believe that a 15-year-old could have such powerful strength either. The most important part is his extensive battle experience and combat techniques. These are not something that can be learned just because one wants to learn it. Without experiencing hundreds of battles, these concepts just cannot be grasped. It's no wonder that old man Chang praised Changyang Xiang Tian so much. He really is an extremely talented genius. It seems these things were all taught by the old man. The Vice Headmaster Chang Baiyan looked relieved as he said, Under the great Master Chang's guidance, Changyang Xiang Tian would find it difficult to not be renowned. The headmaster nodded and said, Even if old man Chang is guiding from the sidelines, if Changyang Xiang Tian didn't originally have such outstanding talent, then even old man Chang wouldn't be able to teach him much, even under careful teaching. If Changyang Xiang Tian wasn't Changyang clan's 4th master, it would really make him my apprentice. After all, such geniuses are rare. If he continues to mature like this, it would be fortunate for Jessen Kingdom. After the award ceremony, Jian Chen retrieved a new uniform and then took a shower to completely wash off all of the filth on his body that he had gained from the few days in the forest. After he wore the brand new uniform, he felt refreshed as he headed back the dorm. Although he had battled virtually every single moment during his 3 days in the forest, he didn't show any traces of exhaustion. In his previous world, he had experienced even worse conditions. After returning to his room, Jian Chen sat cross-legged on his bed. He held a Class 1 monster core in each hand, and began to cultivate. Although Jian Chen's power had already reached the peak of the 10th Saint Force layer, he could clearly sense that the Saint Force in his body had not yet reached a state of saturation. As he gradually began to absorb the energy within the monster cores, Jian Chen's Saint Force once again quickly rose. His speed of cultivation was 10 times faster than when he absorbed World Essence. For the next 3 days, aside from eating meals, Jian Chen used all of his time to cultivate in his room. Eventually, the Saint Force inside him had already reached a saturated state. No matter how much further Jian Chen tried to absorb the monster core's energies, his inner Saint Force would no longer continue to grow. Jian Chen clearly understood that he needed to rush to Saint level and condense his Saint weapon. Otherwise, the Saint Force within him would come to an eternal standstill. In terms of condensing Saint weapons, Jian Chen had long since clearly learned the procedures to becoming Saint from the school library. It used the principle of condensing all inner Saint Force and slowly shaping it into a Saint weapon. In the end, one uses their soul to perfectly harmonize with it. Once the inner Saint Force is completely condensed into a weapon, then a person is officially a saint. Jian Chen didn't stop. He took out a Class 4 monster core from his space belt, preparing to use it if needed, and immediately began to condense a Saint weapon and rush to Saint level. The Saint Force in Jian Chen's Dantian was firmly contained by his soul. In the presence of his powerful soul, Jian Chen had absolute control over the Saint Force in his Dantian. Jian Chen used his mind to control all the Saint Force within his Dantian and gradually began to gather it together. Slowly, he formed it into the shape of a sword, and he finally began to compress it. Jian Chen's powerful soul was brought over from his previous world. Since birth, it far surpassed other people's, and under this power, the weak Saint Force had no way of resisting it. The Saint Force was firmly suppressed by Jian Chen, and he constantly compressed the sword-shaped Saint Force. As the Saint Force was compressed smaller and smaller, Jian Chen's Dantian that was originally filled with Saint Force quickly began to lessen as well. Despite this, the strength of his Saint Force continued to rise, and the makeshift sword became clearer in form as well. Eventually, it became an extremely tiny sword within his Dantian. At the same time, Jian Chen was still trying to condense it even more. Although Jian Chen had already successfully gathered and condensed his Saint Force into a sword, this didn't mean that he had already become a saint. There was still the last and most difficult step left. This step was precisely what blocked so many people in Tianyin continent from becoming saints for the rest of their lives. In this last step, he had to merge a part of his soul into his Dantian to completely condense and form the sword and create a spiritual relationship with it. At the same time, he would have to completely harmonize with the saint weapon. Although this seems simple, it was extremely difficult to do in reality. Although this step was difficult for most people, to those that had incomparably strong souls like Jian Chen, this was something that could be smoothly performed. Jian Chen directly split a part of his soul and began to merge it with the condensed saint weapon in his Dantian. He then used his practiced control to quickly link the two together. Eventually, the two had completely harmonized. They were no longer separate entities. It was at this moment that Jian Chen had finally become a legitimate saint. This last step had provided absolutely no obstruction to him. Just as Jian Chen had perfectly harmonized his soul and his saint weapon, he suddenly felt something strange, as if the condensed sword within him had become his own limb. He could easily control it, and he could also clearly sense every single component of this sword. Right now, Jian Chen's Dantian didn't have a single trace of Saint Force remaining inside it. The only thing left was the condensed sword, which acted as the new energy source. The sword seemed extremely tiny. From its width and length, it didn't seem very different from an embroidery needle. Now that he had condensed his saint weapon, Jian Chen could sense the powerful fluctuations from saint weapons far clearer than he had before. It wouldn't be an exaggeration to say that as an ordinary saint, he could easily defeat a person at the peak of the 10th Saint Force layer. Unless some unexpected or special circumstances occurred, a person at the peak of the 10th layer would absolutely be no match for a saint. Both Jian Chen and Tai Ta were amazing. With Tai Ta's godly strength, as well as his extremely powerful body, even Jian Chen, who had been training Saint Force since he was young, was naturally not as powerful as Tai Ta. Tai Ta's abnormal strength in addition to his formidable defense was enough to make up for any lack of Saint force. Unless the difference in strength was extremely large, there was no way he could be a match against Tai Ta. At most, they would be stuck at a standstill. Jian Shen had previously used his power at the peak 10th layer to defeat a middle-ranked saint. Although he had completely relied on the experience and battle techniques from his past world, Jian Shen's quick sword techniques and his high accomplishments in the ways of the sword, as well as his fighting willpower gained from countless experiences from life-or-death battles in his previous world were enough to make him invincible to those at the same level as him. In addition, battles with ranks higher than him weren't even worth mentioning either. At this moment, Jian Shen's expression suddenly changed. Immediately following, his dantian had surprisingly begun to tremble once more. His entire dantian began to fluctuate intensely in an unstable way. As soon as it began fluctuating, before Jian Shen could react, the world essence began to frantically burst forth. The countless surrounding world essence seemed to have been affected by some invisible attractive force, and gradually began to gather where Jian Shen was. At this moment, Jian Shen's body seemed to have left his control, and it felt as though all of his pores had suddenly opened. They frantically began absorbing the dense world essence surrounding him. The energy within the monster core in Jian Shen's hand also fiercely dropped, forming a stream of energy visible to the naked eye which flowed into Jian Shen's body. At this moment, Jian Shen's body was like a bottomless pit. It didn't matter how strong the world essence around him was, it was completely absorbed into his body like a whale swallowing water. At the same time, the energy of the Class 4 monster core in his hand rapidly diminished, and the speed at which it was being absorbed was unbelievable. The originally fist-sized monster core was shrinking at a speed visible to the naked eye. Chapter 54, Mutation of the Dantian. Jian Shen had no idea what was happening to his body at all. Since he had lost total control over his body, he was completely unable to stop the absorption of the world essence around him. Feeling his own body absorbing the world essence at such a frightening speed, Jian Shen still maintained a determination of steel despite feeling slightly pressed for time. If his body continued to absorb the world essence at this rate, it was unknown how much longer his body would be able to last before it exploded from the sudden increase of concentrated qi. But what puzzled Jian Shen the most was that he had no idea how this happened to begin with. Why did his dantian suddenly start to absorb the world essence out of the blue at such a remarkable speed? This left Jian Shen with no small amount of terror. He knew in his heart that the world essence around him was rapidly congregating and the area around him became like a storm as it flowed at a frantic speed. The gale of qi roared and whistled throughout Kargath Academy as both leaves and loose rocks were sent flying into the air. But when the world essence entered Jian Shen's dantian, it was as if he threw a rock into the ocean, as the world essence assimilated into his body, leaving no indication that it was there to begin with. For that reason, Jian Shen let out a sigh of relief. Although he didn't know what had caused his dantian to go through such a dramatic change, he was glad that his body wouldn't explode from the world essence. At the same time, within the high central tower of Kargath Academy, the headmaster of the academy suddenly cried out in shock, "What's happening? The world essence is fluctuating in such a violent way." As he spoke, the headmaster had already flew out of the window, leaving behind an after image. The moment he flew through the window, he soared into the sky at an extreme speed and immediately found himself at the dorm room of Jian Shen after a few seconds. He looked at the dorm with doubt and puzzlement as he continued to stare at the room. Meanwhile, a streak of white light came blurring over and stopped a few hundred meters behind the headmaster. It was the vice headmaster, Biyao. Even after the arrival of Biyao, another dozen people came flying over in rapid succession before coming to a stop behind Biyao to look at where the world essence was congregating at. They were all teachers of the academy with strength stronger than most, and so with the violent fluctuations of the world essence, there would be no way at all for them to not notice. Biyao looked at the amassed world essence with amazement as he cried out in wonder, "Headmaster, what has happened here? Why has the world essence gathered itself in this area?" Although the headmaster's face looked focused, his eyes were staring blankly as he replied, "Even I don't know what has happened here, let's go find out." With that, the headmaster plummeted down to the ground with Biyao following right behind him. The rest of you stay here, do not allow anyone else to come close. He called out to the teachers. All the teachers wanted to follow the headmaster to find out the answer to this mystery, but with the words of Biyao, the teachers stopped their initial momentum and returned to their original spots obediently. When it came to Biyao, no teacher dared to violate his commands. Quickly, both the headmaster and Biyao arrived outside of the door to Jian Chen's room, where the world essence was inside. As Biyao silently knocked onto the door, it suddenly smashed into pieces and the scene inside was projected towards the two. Inside, they saw Jian Chen sitting cross-legged on his bed with his eyes closed as he continued to cultivate. The world essence was still being absorbed into his dantian with such a terrifying speed that it made his body outline blurry as a fog concealed him slightly. Seeing this phenomenon, both Biyao and the headmaster were speechless. They never would have thought that the world essence being concentrated here was because of a single person's cultivation. Not only that, but they were stunned by the amazing speed at which Jian Chen was absorbing the world essence. So it was Changyang Xiang Tian. How could this be possible, with his strength? How could he bring about such an effect like this? Biyao cried out in shock as he watched what was inconceivable to him. Even the headmaster was trembling as his eyes stared deeply at Jian Chen. After a good while, he let out a sigh. This kid is not ordinary at all. Hearing the headmaster, Biyao nodded his head in complete belief in the headmaster. In his heart, he had always known that Jian Chen was never an ordinary student. Headmaster, what should we do now then? He asked. We wait, came the reply. And so, the headmaster and vice-headmaster stood outside Jian Chen's room and waited for him to reawaken. They didn't enter his room, and didn't make a sound, almost as if they were afraid of accidentally disturbing the cultivating Jian Chen. Jian Chen had long since been aware that his door had been smashed apart, but he wasn't able to move both his body and mouth since he wasn't in control. And the Class 4 monster core gripped tightly in his hand was visibly smaller now to the naked eye, its size already roughly the same size of a ping-pong ball. All of the energy and world essence that was being absorbed into Jian Chen's dantian disappeared like a stone falling into the ocean without leaving behind a single ripple of water behind. Regarding this situation within his dantian, Jian Chen was absolutely clueless and didn't understand where all of the world essence was going. Soon after some time had passed, the energy in the Class 4 monster core was completely absorbed by him. Finally, within his dantian a change was happening as light specks of both azure and violet started to appear. The moment the specks appeared, his dantian suddenly started to absorb the world essence at an even faster rate, and even started to absorb world essence from a farther distance. With the azure and violet light specks, world essence from a dozen feet away felt the pull and began to rush towards Jian Chen before being absorbed through the pores in his body and into the glowing specks. Because of Jian Chen's fast absorption rate of the world essence, a faint white mist was clearly noticeable to the naked eye as it surrounded him. Because of this white mist, his own body was only faintly discernible, making both him and the area around him seem much more mysterious than before. The increase in the rate of absorption did not go unnoticed by the two men standing outside of the door. Staring at each other in the eye, they were both astonished at what they were both seeing. By this point, the entire Kargath Academy was aware of the sudden influx of world essence, but aside from the teachers, each and every student took it to be a sudden gust of wind, and took no more notice to it. Jian Chen's dantian continued to absorb the world essence for half the day before finally stopping. Jian Chen completely absorbed all of the world essence dozens of kilometers away. At the moment, aside from the completed sword made from his condensed saint force, Jian Chen's dantian also contained azure and violet specks of light. The specks were extremely small, and they had extremely faint glows as well. The way they flickered made it seem like they would burn out at any moment. Probing the azure and violet specks of light that had just appeared within his dantian, Jian Chen's heart momentarily grew heavy. This was the first time he had ever encountered an uncontrollable circumstance within the dantian. He had no desire to encounter such an issue. However, what he could say for certain was that these azure and violet light specks were definitely related to the uncontrollably crazy absorption of the world essence that he had experienced earlier. Could it be that these azure and violet lights are completely made of the world essence from before? Jian Chen secretly guessed. The great amount of world essence that had entered his dantian before had completely disappeared without a trace, like a rock in the large sea. This was something completely unfathomable. In addition, after absorbing that vast amount of world essence, these strange light specks had appeared within his dantian. This made it obvious to Jianshen that the two events were connected. However, what made Jianshen really doubtful and worried was the question: what exactly were those strange light specks within his dantian, and what did they do? Would their existence be of any harm to him? These were the questions Jianshen was currently most concerned about. The latter question particularly made him feel unrest. After hesitating for a bit, Jianshen finally tried attempting to control the azure and violet lights. However, after a few experiments, his mood became more and more serious. After some internal inspections, although he could clearly see the specks of light, every time he tried to manipulate them, he would suddenly discover that the light specks existing within his dantian would become similar to mirages. He could easily pass through them, and was completely unable to grab a hold of them and put them under his control. It was as if they didn't really exist. To every cultivating person, the dantian was an extremely important part of the body. Jianshen definitely did not wish to see his dantian go through some situation beyond his control. Otherwise, for all he knew, it could prove to be fatal during some critical moment later. Whatever. Whether it's good or bad, it's not like I can do anything about it. I'm a person who has died once already anyways. Why should I care about these things? Jianshen soon came to the conclusion that he wouldn't bother toiling over the strange changes in his dantian any longer. Since the circumstances were beyond his control, he could only calmly accept them. Jianshen slowly opened his eyes, his gaze perfectly calm. Although successfully becoming a saint was an exciting achievement, because an uncontrollable circumstance had occurred within his dantian, he could not bring himself to be happy. Just as Jianshen opened his eyes, the headmaster and vice-headmaster that had been waiting outside the whole time walked in together. Seeing the headmaster walk in, Jianshen quickly got off the bed and greeted them, "Headmaster, vice-headmaster." The headmaster had a wide smile across his face as he steadily looked at Jianshen. "Changyang Xiang Tian, the world essence you just released was abnormal. Did you encounter any problems during your cultivation? If so, don't hold yourself back and tell me. Perhaps I can help you," the headmaster said in a tone of great concern. "Thank you for your concern, headmaster. Everything has been going well, as I haven't yet encountered any problems," Jianshen calmly said. He didn't think his dantian situation was something that the headmaster could resolve. Saying it would only stir up trouble, and it was better to just stay silent. Chapter 55, The Emperor's Recognition. The headmaster laughed joyously. "Changyang Xiang Tian, it looks like you've broken through to become a saint." Jianshen nodded his head slightly and said, "Yes, I have only just condensed my saint weapon. And yet, I am still not sure if you've become an upper-level saint or a middle-level saint." The headmaster beamed. To him, Jianshen was at the very least the same strength as a middle-level saint. After all, he had personally seen such a tremendous amount of world essence be absorbed by him. Although he didn't know what type of method Jianshen had used to absorb it all, but he at the very least understood that after absorbing this much world essence, there was no way Jianshen would only be at the primary saint level. To see Jianshen immediately cross over the primary level to the middle level of sainthood, the headmaster couldn't help but be extremely happy. With this, his Kargath Academy could finally be proud of having such a talented student. "Headmaster, I've only just condensed a saint weapon, so my strength should definitely be at the primary level." Jianshen knew that the headmaster believed he had completely absorbed all of the world essence and asked him this question for that reason. "Primary level," a voice cried. This time it wasn't the headmaster who spoke, but Biyao, who was standing behind him with a look of disbelief. "How could that be? You've absorbed such an enormous amount of world essence, so how could you only be at the primary saint level?" "I also don't know." Jianshen's face let out a bitter smile. He didn't intend to reveal the things that happened in his own dantian. "Okay, since Changyang Xiang Tian is fine, then we should leave." The headmaster's gaze was directed at Jian Chen as he said, "Changyang Xiang Tian, right now you have just become a saint, and you should properly familiarize yourself with your saint weapon's uses." After saying these words, the two people, headmaster and vice-headmaster, left Jian Chen's room. After leaving the dormitories, vice-headmaster Biyao with a face full of curiosity asked, "Headmaster, Changyang Xiang Tian obviously absorbed a colossal amount of world essence. How could he still only stay at the primary saint level? This just doesn't make sense." When he heard this, the headmaster slightly nodded his head and said, "Yes, it certainly doesn't abide to common sense, or there might be a secret Changyang Xiang Tian has that we do not know of. Otherwise, how could he absorb all the world essence dozens kilometers away? It's obviously an impossible task." After saying this, the headmaster paused for a moment, then continued, "This matter is something that we should not pry into. From now on, for any matters concerning Changyang Xiang Tian, as long as it doesn't cause too much of a ruckus, we shouldn't interfere. Let him grow as he wishes, as a genius path is usually made by himself. If they don't weather the storm, they will never truly grow, and with only peaceful times, they will eventually wane." "Yes, Biyao understands," the vice-headmaster answered respectfully. His mind was clear. In order to cultivate a genius, this would do whatever Kargath Academy would have to do. The headmaster stared off into the azure sky as he muttered to himself, "Changyang Xiang Tian is 15 years old this year. To reach sainthood by his 15th year would cause quite a shock throughout the Tian Yuan continent. It really does look like Changyang Xiang Tian is a true genius, so I truly hope he continues down his path and does not die a premature death. Otherwise, this would be a heavy loss for our Jessen kingdom. It's a shame the ancestor of the Changyang clan has been missing for 100 years. If he was still alive, then his plan might have succeeded." After the headmaster left, Jian Chen continued to sit cross-legged on the bed once more and observed the azure and violet glow within his dantian. He let out a sigh. Not only did he not know what was the matter with the glows, but he also had no control over them. With another sigh, Jian Chen decided to forget about them since it would waste precious time if he did. He had already died once and already experienced many things. Aside from the maternal love he felt for his mother by Yun Tian, there wasn't much else Jian Chen cared about. Jian Chen sucked in a deep breath and slowly calmed himself. Concentrating deeply on his right hand, his heart thumped before a strong source of energy flashed as a slender longsword appeared in his right hand. The long sword was unusually thin and the entire body was a silver white, almost like a mirror that reflected the surrounding area on the blade. The sword was around 4 feet long and 2 fingers wide. Engraved on the blade next to the hilt were 2 words, "Light Wind." This sword's appearance was almost exactly like Jian Chen's treasured sword in his previous life. Even the name itself was the exact same one, called the Light Wind Sword. Jian Chen's way of the sword placed a strong emphasis on quickness and agility. With the ability to strike in 1,000 different ways, he was like the wind that came in without a shadow and left without a footprint. Holding on to the Light Wind Sword, Jian Chen couldn't help but smile tremendously. At the moment where he grasped onto the sword, he felt the familiarity he had with his previous world come rushing back to him. However, the only difference was that Jian Chen felt that the sword was like an extension of his arm. He didn't need to expend as much strength to control it. Jian Chen could also feel his soul connecting with the sword to establish a perfect relationship between the two. The two were one and no longer divided. This was a feeling he had never felt before in his previous world. Jian Chen jabbed out with his sword, letting the silver blade flash as it shot outwards. Ding! A clear sound was heard as the Light Wind Sword whistled in the air. It would appear that this sword was on the same level as the ones refined from the finest of iron. Jian Chen gently caressed the blade with his left hand joyfully as if the sword was his most favorite person. To any true swordsman, the sword was the item they were the most fond of and could not replace. The sword was their life and their soul, and Jian Chen was a firm believer of that as well. When Jian Chen summoned the Light Wind Sword, it had disappeared from within his dantian and the energy had been completely concentrated onto his hand to form the blade in real life. Not only was this sword able to deal out major damage, but this was also the source of Jian Chen's energy and replaced his dantian as the source. Jian Chen's heart thumped once more as the sword started to disappear and returned to his dantian as the mini version of the light wind sword. 2 days after Jian Chen had broken through to sainthood, he had spent the time observing the two colored glows within his dantian. Other than that, he spent most of the time in the library in order to find a book that would help shed some light on the situation with his dantian. However, he always came up empty-handed. During those 2 days, Jian Chen's breakthrough to sainthood had been passed around through the academy like a great wave, since they all knew Jian Chen had gotten to that level too fast. Every student at Kargath Academy knew that he had joined the academy a few months ago at the 8th Saint Force layer. And after those few months, he had suddenly broken through to become a saint. This type of cultivation speed was far too fast, causing everyone to cry out in astonishment. This record had completely squashed out the previous #1 cultivation genius Cheng Mingxiang. Far away from Kargath Academy in a splendid dazzling palace, a jewel-embedded robe-wearing middle-aged man sat in the middle of the study room while reading a book. "Your Majesty, a message courier has arrived." A respectful but deep voice called out from outside the room. Hearing that, the middle-aged man slowly put down his book and looked towards the entrance of his room. "Come in," he stated. This middle-aged man was the emperor of the Jesson Kingdom. Kada senator. As the emperor spoke, the doors to the study room opened, and a man wearing a black pao entered. He was approximately 30 years old and quickly walked into the room. When he was within 30 steps away from the emperor, he immediately stopped where he was and knelt down onto his knees. "Your Majesty, a letter just came from Headmaster Ka Fei Er in Kargath Academy." Originally, the emperor didn't care at all for the letter, but the moment he had heard the name Ka Fei Er, his face immediately grew solemn and placed the book down onto the table. "Bring me the message now." "Yes, Your Majesty." A nearby bodyguard standing next to the emperor respectfully responded. He immediately took the letter in his hand, and closely inspected it. Only after confirming there were no problems with it did he walk up and hand it over to the emperor. The emperor took the letter and immediately opened it. His calm face gradually began to form a smile, as he murmured, "This Changyang Xiang Tian is indeed a heavenly genius." Not only did he defeat a saint while being at the 8th Saint Force layer, he also managed to defeat a middle-ranked saint when he was only at the 10th layer. Moreover, he had successfully condensed his saint weapon at the age of 15. This is definitely a genius. It's no wonder that he received so much praise from Uncle. With Uncle's insight, he naturally can distinguish certain people. If Uncle recommends Changyang Xiang Tian to this extent, then I should be doing something about it as well. Changyang Xiang Tian has the Changyang clan backing him, even more so since he's the 4th master. It looks like getting a hold of him will be impossible. In that case, I can only try my hardest to seduce him. Although the Changyang clan has already been silent for a dozen years, the inside information about their clan is still true. Their strength cannot be underestimated, and is enough for me to act. Since it is so, I'll just do this. The emperor seemed to have decided on something as he immediately said, "Servants, fetch me pen and ink." Soon afterwards, the chamberlain arrived with the pen and ink ready. The emperor grasped the pen and began to smoothly write out his words. He delicately picked up the paper and reread the words written on it, before slowly folding it up and leaving the study. With the scroll in hand, the emperor was escorted by a group of guards sticking tightly to him through layers after layers of halls, before finally entering a beautiful courtyard. When the emperor had just stepped into the courtyard, a 50 to 60-year-old elder came out from a room within the courtyard. He calmly looked at the emperor and smiled, "So it was your Majesty that had arrived. Please come in." The emperor walked up to the elder, not yet entering the room. He handed the scroll in his hand to the elder, and solemnly said, "Senior Yi Ming, this is an extremely important letter that I want you to personally deliver to Lore City's Changyang clan." Hearing this, the elder's face grew more serious. He reached out to receive the scroll from the emperor's hand and said, "Your Majesty, don't worry. I will definitely deliver this letter." The elder clearly understood that since he was being sent to personally deliver the letter, it definitely was not just about a simple matter. After the letter in his hand was sent out, the emperor inwardly sighed, as he thought to himself, "You heir, for the sake of our kingdom's development, for the sake of our kingdom's future, your father has no choice but to sacrifice you." Chapter 56, 7th level of the library. Early next morning, the cross-legged Jian Chen slowly opened his eyes. He had not been cultivating for the past 2 days, and instead was spending his days at the library reading books. Every night, he immersed himself with trying to understand the sword within his dantian, in order to learn to use his saint weapon as efficiently as possible. After all, Jian Chen had only recently broken through to sainthood, and even though the saint weapon within him was connected to his mind, he still didn't know how to use the saint weapon to perfection. Jian Chen, who had experience from the previous world, still found the saint weapon in this world a fresh new experience. If he didn't spend his time familiarizing himself with it, then even connecting his soul with his saint weapon like he did with the tree branch, it would still be very hard to show off the pinnacle of his strength. The reason for this was the same as a person had a severed arm for 10 to 20 years, but the arm suddenly grew back. Since that person was familiar with living with a severed arm and now had to face the newly grown arm, they would also be a bit unfamiliar to his condition. This development required time to slowly accept and become comfortable with. Standing up from his bed, Jian Chen walked out of his room and headed towards the dining halls. Then, as per usual, after eating, he headed to the library. The doors to the library were already open, but there weren't many people inside, just the regular janitorial lady. Jian Chen looked at the nearly empty library and then walked towards the 5th level of the library. For the past few days, all of the books he had been interested in, from the 1st to 4th level, have all been completely read by him. The library had a total of 7 levels. The first 2 levels could be accessed by anyone below the saint level, while the 3rd and 4th levels would be open to those who broke through to the saint level. The 5th level of the library wasn't open to any student except for the freshman champion, so for those who wanted to read the books from that level, they would have to be a teacher from the academy. The 6th and 7th layer of the library was protected by very strong bindings, and only the headmaster and vice-headmaster could enter. For those who wanted to enter, they would need the strict approval of either the headmaster or vice-headmaster first. Even though the 5th story of the library wasn't open to the students, Jian Chen, who had achieved the first place in the freshman competition, could freely enter the 5th level. The amount of space the 5th level occupied wasn't really that big, and the number of books weren't very many either. If you added them all up, the number was barely 100, which was incomparable to the 10,000s of books that the first level had. But Jian Chen knew that any one of these 100 books had a value far greater than any of the books he had ever read before. The 5th level of the library was very quiet. Although not many people visited it, Jian Chen could see that this place was cleaned by someone very often. The entire room was clean. One wouldn't be able to find a single speck of dust in it. Jian Chen walked towards the bookshelves and selected a book on cultivation before walking back towards the table. The contents of the book were only about cultivation. Although he didn't know if the contents of the book would help him with his problem, it would at least enrich his mind with other information he deemed helpful. Jian Chen was extremely invested in reading, to the point of addiction. Although the information recorded inside the book had almost nothing that could help him, it still helped open his eyes and broadened his horizons to a whole new world of cultivation. The information he saw was about things he could never think about before in his past life. The information on cultivation written inside the book wasn't too profound and only had a few dozen pages, so he quickly finished the book. After reading it, Jian Chen placed the book back onto the bookshelves and started to mutter to himself, as if he was trying to commit the knowledge to memory. After carefully putting the book back in its original location, Jian Chen grabbed another book and started to repeat the process of reading once more. Within the 5th level of the library, practically all of the books were left behind by predecessors to help people with cultivation techniques. However, the majority of these cultivation techniques were not too strong. Most of them were barely above the primary earth tier level. The time slowly went by, as Jian Chen resided on the 5th level to read book after book. He had completely forgotten about the time. He hadn't noticed that he was no longer alone, as 2 other middle-aged men appeared. Just one look at the 2 was enough to tell that these were teachers of the academy. The 2 middle-aged men appeared to know Jian Chen. When they saw him, their eyes let out a very surprised look. However, they did not make a sound to avoid disturbing him. Just then, an old man wearing a light blue and luxurious Chang Pao walked up from below. He looked to be in his 50s or 60s. His hair was as white as a crane, but his appearance was like that of a young man. He had a mysterious expression that constantly flashed in his eyes. The 5th level of the library wasn't too big, and so after the elderly man entered the 5th level of the library, he promptly walked to the side to get to the staircase that would lead to the 6th layer. All of a sudden, he had noticed a young child out of the corner of his eye. The elderly man came to a sudden stop as he sized up the child in his head. Immediately recognizing the academy uniform on the tall but slender child, he realized with a start, Changyang Xiang Tian. Jian Shen was immediately brought back to his senses and looked back to the old man who had called him. His face was a little sluggish before he jolted to his feet with a smile. "Headmaster, why have you come here?" This man was the headmaster of Kargath Academy. The headmaster's voice had simultaneously startled the two teachers. The moment they saw the headmaster, they looked startled and placed their books down onto the table before standing up. Cupping their hands to salute the headmaster, they called out respectfully, "We greet the headmaster." The headmaster of Kargath Academy was a well-known figure whose name resounded throughout the Jesson Kingdom. His strength was on the level of a heaven saint master, and he was one of the 6 strongest individuals of the Jesson Kingdom. A heaven saint master on the Tianyuan continent was still regarded as a very strong and valiant person. The headmaster's gaze swept across the 2 middle-aged men and waved his hand as he said, "Don't mind me, please continue reading your books." "Yes, headmaster." The 2 middle-aged men immediately sat down again, though they didn't have the spirit to concentrate on the books in their hands. The headmaster's eyes glanced over the book within Jian Chen's hand. With a smile as he nodded his head in satisfaction, he said with a gratified tone, "Changyang Xiang Tian, do you like this library?" Jian Chen nodded his head without hesitation. "That's right, from this library, I can learn many different things. Even if the information here provides little to no help to someone, it'll still increase one's knowledge." Hearing Jian Chen, the headmaster looked at him with admiration. Good. Changyang Xiang Tian, someone with your understanding and logic is hard to come by. Since you enjoy being in this library, then let me help you. Come with me." Turning around, the headmaster started to walk towards the stairway to the 6th level. Seeing the direction that the headmaster was heading in, Jian Chen fully understood the old man's meaning and was overjoyed. He immediately returned the book in his hand to the original position and followed behind the headmaster toward the 6th level of the library. Seeing Jian Chen disappear off into the staircase, the two teachers looked at his direction with some envy. The 6th and 7th levels of the library could only be accessed by the headmaster and the vice-headmaster. Those who wanted access needed the approval of one of the two first. When it came to the 6th and 7th levels of the library, these were the areas that every single teacher of the academy wanted to go to, mostly because those 2 levels contained high-level techniques. Not only that, but the other books in that level had rich information pertaining to many other fields. Most importantly, on the 6th and 7th levels of the library, there were records of many of the different types of spiritual treasures on the Tianyuan continent. Very quickly, Jian Chen followed the headmaster to the entrance of the 6th level. Jian Chen could clearly see the transparent bindings keeping the door shut. The bindings of the 6th level and the 7th level are all arranged by the previous generations of headmasters. The defense is very strong, and even if it is a heaven saint master, it is impossible to break it within a short period of time. The headmaster's tone carried a bit of pride, and he immediately took out a token constructed from purple coin. The token had very complicated markings on it, and it seemed to be a design of some sort. The purple coin token in the headmaster's hands released a faint purple glow, and soon the purple glow grew more and more bright. At last, a ray of light like a material substance shot out and directly landed on the bindings. The transparent bindings slowly rippled twice like water, and the center slowly split apart to form a large hole that a person could easily enter through. "Changyang Xiang Tian, follow me inside." The headmaster called out to Jian Chen, and directly walked inside. Jian Chen followed behind the headmaster, and they walked straight through the 6th level onto the 7th level. The library's 7th level was very empty. It was only the size of a typical room, and there was a single wooden table placed in the center. In front of the table was a small bookshelf that had a few thin books. There were 2 boxes on top of the bookshelf. One of the boxes was completely made of extremely precious jade, while the other was entirely made of purple coin. Both of their values were not at all lacking, and it could be seen that the items within these boxes had to be extremely important. Ever since Kargath Academy was first established, this library has always existed. Up until now, it's been here for hundreds of years already. These past few centuries, the number of people aside from the headmaster of each era that have come to this library's 7th level hasn't been small. However, every single one of them was an extremely influential power, if not an impressive expert from the Tianyan continent. You are the first Kargath Academy student to have entered the 7th level these past few centuries. The headmaster explained slowly, with an extremely calm tone. Changyang Xiang Tian, this library's 7th level is where my Kargath Academy's riches are contained. The entire 7th level is enveloped by a layer of powerful bindings. This layer of bindings were painstakingly created by the Saint Ruler, Brian, the first generation's headmaster. The items within all have special tracers. As long as the bindings aren't broken, there is no way they can be brought outside. In addition, the books inside here were all the books about cultivation methods that Headmaster Brian had collected himself, if not personally written by him. These are Kargath Academy's greatest riches. Hearing this, Jian Chen's expression became extremely serious. He hadn't imagined that the library's 7th level would be so important. The fact that Kargath Academy's first-generation headmaster had actually been a saint ruler that was an exceptional expert was also shocking to Jian Chen. The headmaster's gaze brightly looked at Jian Chen, and his expression changed and he said with a strict tone, Changyang Xiang Tian, right now I use my authority as the headmaster to allow you to read any book except the one inside the jade box. You only have this one chance, I hope you properly utilize it. Jian Chen solemnly nodded his head. I thank the headmaster for the help. The jade box contains items that would not be of any use to the current you, and it may even obstruct your growth. Therefore, you must not look at the items within the jade box. However, the purple coin box contains a primary heaven tier cultivation technique that you can read however much you want. However, your Changyang clan's family heirloom law of Yang Qi isn't any weaker than the Collecting Heart Sutra. Therefore, choosing whatever cultivation method you use isn't something you should be too hasty with. Okay, you can stay here by yourself and take your time to read them. Remember, you only have this once chance to enter the 7th floor of the library. I hope you treasure it. The bindings at the entrance will only prevent the people who are trying to enter. If you want to leave, you can leave directly. After finishing, the headmaster immediately turned and left the place, disappearing outside the bindings on the 7th floor, leaving Jian Chen standing there dazed. Chapter 57. Arranged marriage. Jian Chen took in a deep breath to calm himself down before walking towards the bookshelves. His eyes swept over the shelves one by one before finally taking out a single book. He walked towards the center of the floor to a table and sat down. The book was for those who gained insights as well as techniques for breaking through a bottleneck. Even Earth Saint Masters could benefit from the notes clearly written on it, although there weren't many books on this level, but the quality of the content inside was of the utmost quality. If any one of these books were to be released to the common populace, then it would cause a widespread reign of carnage for it. Jian Chen slowly flipped the pages of the book one by one as he read it. Soon the book was finished off by him, causing Jian Chen to sink into meditation. Whatever book he grabbed had led to his eyes being opened wide to the world of possibilities. The cultivation system in this world had already long since toppled the system in his previous world. With this book, Jian Chen felt like he had a stronger understanding of this world's cultivation system now. Not too long after, Jian Chen had finished reading a dozen books from the shelves. Half of the books talked about insights on cultivation as well as the problems a cultivator might experience. The other half were books about cultivation techniques, but the strongest of these techniques were only at the upper earth tier level. What Jian Chen had found most helpful was the personal letter from Kargath Academy's first headmaster Brian. Jian Chen's eyes swept over to the purple coin box. According to the headmaster, the purple coin box contained a primary heaven tier technique. Although Jian Chen didn't have a clear idea of how valuable a heaven tier technique was, but he did know that it was still quite the priceless treasure. After all, the Heaven Tier techniques was the second strongest type of technique on the Tianyuan continent. There was only one other tier higher than it, Saint Tier. Jianshan slowly opened the purple coin box only to see a hand-sized book inside. On top of the cover of the book had words, Collecting Heart Sutra, written on it in bold cursive. The moment the book touched his hand, Jianshan felt a soft sensation enter his arm. It was almost as if there was a sense of warmth to the book despite it never being touched before. The book was made of some kind of magical beast leather. It was extremely supple and strong, and hard to damage in any way. He slowly took the book out of the box and carefully started to flip through the pages to read it. He was reading it with a serious face since Jianshan knew that such a strong cultivational technique was extremely rare to come by. Although he didn't initially plan to practice this technique, just looking at it would bring him some benefits at the very least. Though he wasn't sure if he would be able to find something of value within the book to help him with his problem. 4 hours later, Jianshan's eyes finally moved away from the book as he bowed his head in contemplation. After he was sure he committed the contents of the book to memory, he returned it to the original box and then walked back to the table. His eyes looked at the bookshelves before he let out a sigh. With no small amount of regret, he began to head down the stairs. However, Jianshan had profited greatly today in the 7th level of the library. On his way down, Jianshan took a look at the 6th level of the library. Although the books within the 6th level was not as valuable as the 7th level, the profits and the knowledge gained from them were still great. To Jianshan, the predecessors had imparted their knowledge and insights in those books, so the knowledge would prove to be extremely beneficial. Jianshan had learned much about the many different spiritual treasures of the Tianyuan continent, something that couldn't be found anywhere on the first 5 levels of the library. By the time Jianshan had walked out of the library, the sky had already darkened. Unknowingly, he had already spent the entire day inside the library. He'd even forgotten to eat. Growl. At that moment, Jianshan's stomach unexpectedly made a loud sound. Jianshan reached down to rub his stomach that was currently so empty that it had begun to hurt a bit. He smiled helplessly, and then started to walk towards the dining hall. After quickly finishing his dinner, Jianshan went straight back to the dorms. En route, he managed to attract quite a few students' gazes. There were envious, respectful, jealous, and all other types of expressions in their looks. Jianshan didn't pay any mind to the surrounding attention, and walked to the dorm without a sideways glance. After he entered the dorms, he could see that in the distance, there was a familiar figure standing in front of his room. He felt relieved as he realized it was his older brother, Jianghu. It's so late, and yet Big Brother is waiting for me to return here. Could it be he has something urgent that he really needs to tell me? Jianshan inwardly guessed. He quickened his pace, and rushed over. Big Brother, it's already so late. Why are you waiting for me here? What is there that cannot wait until tomorrow to discuss? Jianshan asked as he walked up to Jianghu. Seeing Jianshan approach, Jianghu's face turned bitter, and he said with a sigh, fourth brother, you've finally returned. Where did you run off to today? I pretty much searched the entire school, yet I couldn't find you, so I have been waiting here for the entire day now. Jianshan said apologetically, Big Brother, were you looking for me for something extremely important? Hearing this, Jianghu smiled happily and said in an excited voice, of course there's something. Moreover, it's something major. Come, fourth brother, let's enter the room to talk. Jianshan nodded, and took out the key from his space belt to open the room's door. This room's door was newly replaced, since the old one had been turned to rubble by the vice headmaster. Immediately after they entered the room, Jianghu closed the door, and then urgently said, fourth brother, the clan just sent a message. You're so lucky, your big brother is really envious of you. Hearing this, Jianshan was puzzled, and he asked in confusion, Big brother, exactly what has happened? Jianghu sat down on Jianshan's bed, and said with a happy smile, fourth brother, I guess you don't know yet. Father has already arranged for your marriage. Hearing this, Jianshan's expression clearly became startled. After finally returning to his senses, he asked in an incredulous and shocked tone, "What? An arranged marriage?" Jianghu fiercely nodded, and excitedly replied, "That's right, fourth brother. Moreover, your partner is the emperor's third princess, Princess Gulan. I've heard that this arranged marriage had even been the emperor's own suggestion." Hearing this, Jian Chen's expression immediately grew more serious. He felt that this situation was extremely abnormal, and moreover, he hadn't agreed to it. He felt dissatisfied by the fact that his own marriage had been decided by his clan without him. Having such a fate decided by others made Jian Chen feel extremely disgusted. Seeing Jian Chen's expression, Jianghu thought that Jian Chen was worrying over Princess Gulan's appearance. He couldn't help but laugh. "Fourth brother, don't worry. Although I've never seen Princess Gulan, I've heard quite a few things about her. Princess Gulan is the emperor's third daughter. She's naturally beautiful, and her looks are enough for cities to fight over her. Since she was young, she's been a gifted genius. She has not only mastered the 4 fine arts, she's also quite a well-known talent in cultivation." At the age of 15, Princess Gulan had reached the 7th Saint Force layer. She has been doted on quite a lot by the emperor. She is the emperor's beloved person. The emperor loves her dearly in every possible way. Hearing this, Jianghu sighed. Princess Gulan's identity isn't her only good point. With just her gift at cultivation, even your own older brother couldn't compete with her. Fourth brother, His Majesty has betrothed the princess to you. This is a stroke of good fortune, so don't have such a sour look on your face. Jian Chen could only let out a sigh inwardly. Jianghu couldn't understand his thoughts at all. Despite Princess Gulan's beauty, Jian Chen wasn't moved at all. All he wanted to do right now was to improve his own strength. He couldn't afford to waste time with a girl at the moment. Jian Chen also knew that the emperor was aware of his own achievements within Kargath Academy. Otherwise, there was no way the emperor would have been so firm on his decision to betroth his daughter to him. Because this arranged marriage was proposed by the emperor, Jian Chen was absolutely powerless to go against the marriage. His parents wouldn't even dare to give up the chance to establish a friendship with the royal family, let alone a relationship with them. Aside from the emperor taking back the proposal, there would be no way for Jian Chen to refuse it, so he would have to quietly accept it. The only thing that put Jian Chen to ease was the fact that this decision was only just recently made. The official date for the marriage had not yet been announced, meaning the marriage was being put off indefinitely for the time being. This gave him a good time period to breathe. Jian Chen, after all, did not want to talk about this at all. In his previous life, Jian Chen was a wanderer who loved traveling around the world. Without a permanent residence to live in and using the Mother Earth as his bed, with another person by his side, he wouldn't be able to continue to that lifestyle anymore. After Jianghu left, Jian Chen sat on the bed by himself and contemplated deeply. One had to admit that the news from his clan had been too sudden, catching Jian Chen unprepared. I might as well spend the rest of my time cultivating. Power in the end decides everything after all. When my strength grows strong enough, even the emperor would not be able to say anything. Jian Chen sighed as he continued to cultivate. Jian Chen took out a Class 1 monster core from the pile of them within his space ring. He slowly closed his eyes, and began to absorb the power from within the monster core to cultivate it. Ever since he had broken through sainthood 2 days ago, this was the first time he was cultivating. The past 2 evenings, he had been familiarizing himself with how to use and control the saint weapon. Just as Jian Chen started to absorb the energy from within the monster cores, the speed in which the monster core was being absorbed from him was growing faster and faster, almost as if all control was lost as the energy rushed into him. As the energy frantically rushed into him, the rate had instantly increased to a speed several hundred times faster than normal. The sudden rush in cultivation speed caused Jian Chen's face to twitch in surprise. Although every cultivator greatly desired for their cultivation speed to be increased, but Jian Chen's cultivation speed had already reached a frightening level. With this absorption rate of the energy from the monster core, Jian Chen simply didn't have enough time to refine it, which served no purpose for him at all, since energy that wasn't refined by him was not controllable and would only serve to rebel against him within his own body. An end result like that would lead to consequences in which Jian Shen would have a tough time resolving. Jian Shen immediately stopped absorbing the power from the monster core. The only thing worth rejoicing about was that his process of stopping his absorption of the monster core's energy had gone very smoothly. No frightening and uncontrollable scene had occurred. Otherwise, he was afraid that he really would have gotten into deep trouble. Chapter 58. Annoyance from the Dantian. Jian Shen let out a long breath to still his emotions, as he glanced at the monster core in his hand. Although he hadn't been absorbing the energy from within the monster core for very long, he could clearly tell that the energy within the Class 1 monster core was substantially less than before. The monster core had even shrunk in size. Jian Shen inhaled sharply in astonishment at this new change. Although a Class 1 monster core did not have a large amount of energy, before he had become a saint, completely absorbing all of the energy within a Class 1 monster core would require him at least 3 nights. In the short amount of time that he had spent absorbing the energy from the Class 1 monster core, the amount of energy inside had already decreased significantly. Jian Shen couldn't possibly dare to imagine just how much energy he had absorbed into his body in that short amount of time. Afterwards, Jian Shen immediately inspected his inner body once more. However, to his surprise, he couldn't detect any of the energy he had just absorbed at all. His dantian didn't show any change, and the energy inside had no indication of growth either. It was almost as if the entire show just now was merely an illusion that hadn't occurred at all. If it weren't for the fact that Jian Shen could clearly feel that the energy in the monster core was now less than before, then Jian Shen would have thought this situation had all been in his head. This situation was far too weird to understand. His eyes creased together in deep thought, but no matter how much he thought about it, Jian Shen was completely confused. In the end, Jian Shen could only put aside the problem and begin to cultivate the absorbed energy. However, after experiencing that rapid rate of absorption, Jian Shen was very careful now and paid attention to his entire body in order to avoid the same situation as last time. But then who would have thought the moment he started to cultivate, the same event as last time would happen once more. The monster core in his hand emitted a faint glow as the energy inside coursed out of it at an inconceivable speed, before dissipating inside the meridians in his arms. Jian Shen went as rigid as a stone statue on his bed, without the smallest of movements taking place. Right now, he had finally confirmed that this was happening for real, and it was not just some sort of illusion. Just as Jian Shen was going to stop absorbing the monster core's energy, he immediately changed his mind. His entire mind was elevated to the highest level of concentration he could muster as he tried to familiarize himself with this situation. He wanted to clearly understand what was happening within his body, and what the reason was for the sudden terrifying increase in absorption. Moreover, Jian Shen wanted to know why the energy had simply disappeared into his dantian like a stone in the ocean, leaving behind no traces. The monster core within Jian Shen's hands had noticeably shrunken, and the energy inside had been steadily flowing into the meridians of his arms via his pores. With such a great flow of energy rushing into his arm, Jian Shen's skin was starting to feel a little sore from the barrage. When he was absorbing the world essence 2 days ago, its state had been much gentler, so the fast rate of absorption hadn't bothered him too much. But the monster core was different. The monster core had the energy of a magical beast condensed within it. No matter how strong the energy or how pure the soul was, it was far superior to the abilities of the world essence. The monster core also contained a berserk element inside, so when Jian Shen was absorbing the energy from within, he had felt a backlash. Jian Shen paid no attention to the pain at all, and instead completely focused his attention on the situation happening inside himself. The majority of the energy from within the monster core headed towards his dantian and trickled away. Only a small portion of it was assimilated into his body. However, when Jian Shen discovered where the energy was going, his face grew bright, as the energy was flowing towards the azure and violet glows within his dantian. The energy had unexpectedly been completely absorbed by the 2 glowing balls. Jian Shen slowly opened his eyes as he stared heavily at the monster core in his hands. Throwing it away, he shut his eyes closed once more, and began to cultivate the world essence as he usually did. The world essence began to flow towards him in a steady stream, faster and faster. Although the speed was at least a dozen times faster than his regular speed, about 99% of the world essence was being absorbed by the two glows of light within his dantian, while he was only absorbing 1% of the remaining amount into his body. After realizing this, Jianshan decided to rely on cultivating using the world essence. However, the speed at which he was cultivating and refining the world essence was 10 times slower than his normal speed. With this conclusion, Jianshan's expression grew ugly. His own personal cultivation rate was cut down to 1/10 of his original rate, something he did not want at all. He hadn't imagined that the two glows in his dantian would be such an annoyance. Afterwards, Jianshan tried to absorb the monster core's energy once more. His solemn face gradually loosened up as he began to think. If he were to cultivate using the energy from the monster core, then his cultivation rate wouldn't be as slow as before he became a saint. Instead, it would be 3 times as fast. The most major flaw was that the amount it took to absorb the energy in this way required a lot of effort. Jianshan had even started to sweat from the exertion. Stopping his cultivation after a while, he looked outside the window to see the pitch-dark skies and helplessly sighed. If the glows in his dantian were to forcibly take his energy each and every time he cultivated, then the variables in his future would only get more difficult. After all, just relying on absorbing the world essence gave him 1/10 of his cultivation speed. Absorbing the energy from the monster core tripled his speed, while also consuming more of his personal energy and focus, something Jianshan couldn't endure. A single Class 1 monster core originally took Jianshan 3 nights to absorb. Right now, absorbing that same Class 1 monster core required the same amount of time it took to make and drink a cup of tea. This meant that in a single night, Jianshan could absorb 50 Class 1 monster cores. Even if Jianshan was made of money, it would be difficult to say if Jianshan could keep up with this new rate of consumption and absorption. According to his knowledge, he knew that this little bump on the road wasn't too hard to overcome. A step is a step. If I don't have any more monster cores, then I'll go out and hunt for more. It's not like the energy will always be taken away from me like this in the future. With this thought in mind, Jianshan took out a batch of monster cores from within his space belt, and continued to cultivate once more. The night passed quickly. The second morning arrived, concluding Jianshan's daily cultivation period. Taking inventory of the amount of monster cores he used, he sucked in a sharp breath in shock. In the span of a single night, he had unexpectedly consumed the energy from 56 Class 1 monster cores. Jianshan smiled bitterly. Even though his space belt contained a wealthy amount of monster cores, with this rate of consumption, the monster cores wouldn't last for more than a few days. When there were no more to absorb, Jianshan would then be forced to rely on the world essence. Right now, Jianshan could only hope that his dantian and the two glows of light inside would become saturated with energy, and stop taking it from him when he cultivated. It looks like I'll have to make a trip to the magical beast forest for some monster cores later. Jianshan muttered under his breath. With a pacified heart, Jianshan departed from his room and walked towards the grove outside of the academy to help teach his older brother with some techniques regarding fighting, as well as helping him gain some battle experience. As the sun rose, Jianshan worked hard to teach Jianghu. Eventually, as the sun was at its highest point, Jianshan concluded his explanations. Big brother, we'll stop here for now. As far as using and transforming your energy, you'll have to spend some time on getting it down. But when it comes to battle experience, you'll just have to fight with others to slowly improve, so there's no point in practicing by yourself so meticulously. Jianshan said to his older brother. For the past few days, Jianshan had spent his mornings teaching Jianghu various aspects of techniques and fighting. Jianghu nodded his head. I understand, fourth brother. Right now, Jianghu did not think that learning from his fourth brother was an odd occurrence. He didn't know what Jianshan's lifestyle was like back at the Changyang mansion, but he could tell that his own brother was a talented genius. Receiving some special attention would have been normal, so it wasn't that far-fetched to think that Jianshan had learned these things from the clan elders. In addition, Jianghu knew that Jianshan loved to read books, frequently spending entire days inside the academy's library. So it was possible that some of the things he knew came from the library as well. Big brother, you should slowly practice by yourself. I'll be leaving first. With that, Jian Chen exited the grove, leaving his brother to continue training by himself. In the middle of one of the academy training grounds, two youths wearing the same academy uniform were fiercely fighting against each other. One of them held a giant blade burning a fiery red as it emitted a sizzling chi. The owner of such a strong weapon was the gifted cultivation genius of Kargath Academy, Qing Mingxiang. Qing Mingxiang's opponent was holding a giant sword that was blue in color. He looked to be older than Qing Mingxiang. However, his face was dripping with sweat as he concentrated on the fight. They fought ferociously, but a perceptive person would have been able to tell that the blue sword wielder was being forced to blindly defend against the red sword wielder. "My lord, I concede. I cannot defend myself any longer," the blue sword holder cried out. Hearing him, Qing Mingxiang immediately paused and let the sword in his hand disappear. "Shallah, it seems like the duration that you can defend yourself for is getting shorter and shorter. Looks like you have to work harder in the future. The current you is weaker than in the past." The youth gave a bitter smile as he laughed. "My lord, it is not that my strength is getting worse, but that your strength is growing faster than mine. I am no longer a suitable opponent for you." Qing Mingxiang looked proud at himself when he heard these words. At that moment, another student wearing the academy uniform came running over towards Qing Mingxiang with an envelope in his hand. "Lord Qing, a letter from the clan elders have come." Chapter 59, Revenge. Qing Mingxiang's face became serious as he heard the student yell. Taking the letter from him, Qing Mingxiang began to rip open the letter. As he read the contents of the letter, Qing Mingxiang's face grew darker and darker as his eyes began to show a raging anger within them. Seeing Qing Mingxiang's reaction, the youth who had just sparred with him asked cautiously, "Lord Qing, what is the matter? Has something bad happened over at the sect?" Clenching his hand together to become a fist, the letter became a crumpled-up ball of paper as Qing Mingxiang grew angrier and angrier. The look in his eye had already evolved to contain a look of extreme hatred. "Changyang Xiang Tian," Qing Mingxiang gnashed at his teeth as his fingers clenched tightly into his palms. Just by looking at him one could tell just how angry he was. Hearing Qing Mingxiang mention Changyang Xiang Tian's name, the youth grew even more confused. Opening his mouth to ask once more, he said, "Lord Qing, what in the world has happened?" Qing Mingxiang growled with a dark voice, "His Majesty has just betrothed Princess Galan to Changyang Xiang Tian, and has already officiated it." The youth's face changed when he heard him. He knew that Qing Mingxiang had fond feelings for the princess. Ever since Qing Mingxiang had first seen her at the imperial palace, he had essentially placed her beauty on the same level as a goddess and developed a deep crush on her. Since then, he had been unable to get over those feelings. Within Qing Mingxiang's own heart, he had already marked Princess Galan as his own. After all, within the Jessan kingdom, he was the only suitable match for a princess like her. Whether it be familial background or his own cultivation talent, Qing Mingxiang was not at all lacking in these two fields. With his Huayun sect, they had power that almost rivaled the power of the royal family of the Jessan kingdom. Within the sect itself, Qing Mingxiang's status was majestic beyond any other person. In the past, Qing Mingxiang had wanted his parents to ask for the princess's hand in marriage from the emperor multiple times, but his parents had continuously wanted him to focus on cultivation instead. They didn't want his cultivation to be interrupted by a girl in the end. His parents' refusal to help him propose to the princess had made him resentful, but he didn't say anything. For in his mind, Qing Mingxiang had decided that Princess Galan was already his and that no one else would be able to snatch her away from him. After all, within the Jessan kingdom, there was no one else worthy of Princess Galan, causing him to feel safe. But he didn't expect at all to meet someone else in Kargath Academy that was no weaker than himself. Changyang Xiang Tian's gift at cultivation had exceeded his own, and he had even taken over Qing Mingxiang's title of Kargath Academy's #1 cultivation genius. Not only did he steal that, but Changyang Xiang Tian had even stolen away his one love, causing Qing Mingxiang to be unable to endure this any longer. The youth that fought against Qing Mingxiang cautiously looked at him before whispering, "My lord, what do you plan to do now?" Qing Mingxiang's eyes flashed with a murderous tint as he snarled, Princess Galan is mine, within the Jessen kingdom, only I am suitable to be married to her. His voice was filled with an unquenchable hatred. Sha-la, bring some people over, we shall head towards Changyang Tian. This time, we will definitely teach him a lesson on trying to steal someone else's woman. Yes, my lord. The youth immediately scurried off in order to gather about people. Due to Qingming Xiang's strength, he had quickly amassed a large group of people. There were at least 16 of them, and all were from noble families and had reached sainthood. Not only that, but the majority of these people had their monster cores taken from them by Jian Chen, causing them to fail the assignment in the forest. So because of that, they all harbored a grudge towards him, and when Qingming Xiang had started to gather people, each one of them eagerly signed up to take part in this. Among the group, there were 2 other people Jian Chen was very familiar with. They were Luo Jian of the Luo clan and Ka Di Yun of the Ka Di clan. Qingming Xiang gave a steady glance at everyone, a great big smile on his face. Good, there's plenty of people here. Even if we were to turn Changyang Tian into a cripple, the Changyang clan wouldn't dare say anything. The people gathered here today have no small amount of influence. Even the emperor would get a headache if he were to try protecting Changyang Tian. Qingming Xiang was confident that he could beat Changyang Tian in a fair battle, but now that His Majesty had officially declared the wedding between Changyang Tian and Princess Galan, his status was like black and white compared to before. Not only did he have the backing of the Changyang clan, but now he had the royal family supporting him. With this combination, even Qingming Xiang, who had a considerable amount of power and influence, would need to think carefully before planning. If he wanted to teach a simple lesson, then there would not be as big a problem, but Qingming Xiang didn't think it would be that easy. So for that reason, he had called many influential people to join him. With a coalition of power like this, the emperor would have to think twice before investigating. The Changyang clan itself didn't even have a voice at all against this group. Sha-la, immediately fetch someone to go look for Changyang Tian's location. Remember, this should not be let out at all. If the vice headmaster or the headmaster find out about it, all of our plans will be ruined. Qingming Xiang ordered his training partner. Yes, my lord. Afterwards, Shala either directly spent money or relied on connections within the academy to secretly hear of Changyang Tian's immediate location. At the same time, he also dispatched quite a few of his trusted people to search the entire academy. It was extremely calm within Kargath Academy. Nothing had been riled up by Qingming Xiang and his group of people's movements. 2 hours later, the 20 students that Shala had dispatched all returned, one by one. Lord Cheng, we've searched the entire Kargath Academy, but there was no signs of Changyang Tian. A person reported to him. Qingming Xiang frowned and said, how is that possible? Could it be that Changyang Tian is not currently within the academy? I've heard Changyang Tian loved to read in the library. Have you searched that building yet? Luo Jian asked from the side. Although Luo Jian had been stabbed by Jian Chen, the medicine had healed his body back to the point of it being as good as new. We've also searched the library. Changyang Tian isn't there. The leader of the search continued. At that moment, a slightly chubby youth said, I heard that Changyang Tian is the freshman ruler. The freshman ruler has the special privilege of being able to enter the library's first 5 levels. Could it be that Changyang Tian is hiding within the 5th level? If that really is true, then we can only wait until he comes out before we act. Hearing their fellow student, everyone in the group nodded. What that person had said had some logic behind it. The leader in charge of the search shook his head and said, that can't be. I already asked the janitor lady within the library. She said that Changyang Tian didn't enter the library at all today. Could it be Changyang Tian is truly not within the academy grounds? Qingming Xiang frowned. At that moment, another student hesitated slightly before saying, Lord Cheng, although we didn't find Changyang Tian, we did discover that Changyang Hu is in the Eastern Grove. Changyang Hu is Changyang Tian's older brother. I feel like he might know of Changyang Tian's whereabouts. Luo Jian's eyes lit up, but his expression soon fell again. He had just remembered everything that had happened that night. the monster cores in his possession had all been stolen from the Changyang brothers and Tai Ta. Although he didn't dare to get revenge on Tai Ta, he wasn't afraid of the consequences of confronting Changyang Xiang Tian's brother Changyang, who, not bad, Changyang, who definitely knows where Changyang Xiang Tian went. I recommend that we go ask him, Luo Jian said in a lower voice, his eyes flashing dangerously. Alright, we'll go find Changyang Hu first. Everyone else quickly agreed with Luo Jian's suggestion. For the sake of not attracting other students' attentions, a dozen of them split with the group and took different paths towards the eastern grove. When the dozen of them rushed to the grove, they saw that Changyang Hu was still there, practicing his martial arts. At the sight of Changyang Hu, Luo Jian's eyes immediately burned in hatred, as if he could spit out flames. Perhaps Changyang Hu was too absorbed in his practice, but he didn't sense Qingming Xiang's people's arrival. Qingming Xiang's group of people walked up to Changyang Hu, and in unison, they stood in a circle surrounding him. Realizing this, Changyang Hu finally awoke from his concentration. By the time he had reacted, he had already been surrounded by dozens of students. Changyang Hu's gaze surveyed his surroundings. After he saw the expressions on the other party's faces, his heart skipped a beat as he had a bad premonition. Especially after he saw Luo Jian's hatred-filled glare towards him, Changyang Hu's expression could not help but grow heavy. What do you guys want? Changyang Hu said. Despite the dozen or so people surrounding him, his face still did not show a single trace of fear. Luo Jian sneered, Changyang Hu, do you not remember what happened in the forest a few days ago? His face grew dark as he spoke and glared at him. Your group dared to steal my 3 days' worth of hard work and caused me to fail. For this slight, I will definitely pay you back an eye for an eye. Changyang Hu snorted, and his gaze at Luo Jian showed no trace of fear as he coldly said, Luo Jian, that was trouble that you had brought onto yourself. There's no way we are to blame for what happened. If you hadn't first tried to steal our monster cores, then the following events wouldn't have occurred. Everything was your own fault. If you want to blame something, you can only blame your lack of strength. You even got defeated by my fourth brother, who hadn't even reached sainthood yet. Changyang Hu mocked, as he looked at Luo Jian in disdain. Luo Jian was momentarily so indignant at Changyang Hu's response that he couldn't respond. The event that had occurred that night in the forest was a humiliation that he would never be able to wipe from his memory. Despite his strength as a middle-ranked saint level, he had lost to a freshman that hadn't yet become a saint. In addition, the monster cores that he had spent 3 days of painstaking efforts to collect had all been taken away. This result was definitely something that the young master of the Luo clan couldn't accept. If word of his humiliation reached the clan, then Luo Jian would not be able to hold his head up high in the future. Chapter 60. Changyang Hu's injuries. Luo Jian flew into a rage and immediately concentrated his energy into his right hand before charging towards Changyang Hu. Changyang Hu's reaction wasn't slow at all, since he had already been ready to retaliate since they surrounded him. So when Luo Jian had summoned his saint weapon, he had summoned his own yellow-colored battle axe without any fear of the rapidly incoming Luo Jian. When the two saints started to move, the surrounding circle of people instinctively took a step back in order to avoid injury. Pung! Luo Jian's sword and Changyang Hu's battle axe clashed against each other, emitting a tremendously loud sound. After the two weapons smashed into each other, the force of their actions caused the two to tremble in reaction. Their feet slowly retreating backwards, with Changyang Hu going back 4 or 5 steps while Luo Jian slowly retreated 2 or 3 steps. The two started to fight at a very close distance, but the spectators could tell that Changyang Hu was slowly losing ground. Although Luo Jian's wind attribute saint force focused on speed, and his attack was slightly weaker, his strength was still at the middle-ranked saint level. Even if Changyang Hu's earth attribute saint force had stronger defense, he wasn't Luo Jian's equal. After all, Changyang Hu had just reached saint level not too long ago. Luo Jian didn't plan on letting Changyang Hu off so easily. His body flashed with a cyan glow, and a wind began to revolve around his body endlessly. Luo Jian's body instantly appeared in front of Changyang Hu, the great sword raised high in the air, glowing cyan. He slashed it down towards Jianghu at frightening speeds. Since Luo Jian's Saint Force used the wind attribute, his speed was levels higher than other people's. Jianghu's expression suddenly changed. Luo Jian's attack speed was so fast that he had no time to counter. In the end, he barely managed to raise the axe in his hand to block the attack with difficulty. Jianghu, accept your death. At that moment when Jianghu's axe hit Luo Jian's sword, another voice came crying out from the sidelines. It was Ka Diyun with his own sword coming straight at him and immediately slashed down onto Jianghu's right arm. An intense pain caused Jianghu to let out a groan. It was obvious that this attack had used quite a bit of Ka Diyun's strength. It left a wound so deep on Jianghu's shoulder that one could see the bone. With his arm having suffered from such a huge attack, Jianghu could no longer maintain the saint weapon in his hand, and the great axe disappeared from his hand. Luo Jian's eyes flashed with a cold look and swung his sword at the stomach of Jianghu. The point of the sword ripped apart his uniform, and left a deep wound on Jianghu's stomach. Immediately, a river of blood came flowing out of the wound, causing his uniform to be dyed a bloody red. A look of extreme pain flashed through his face, but he didn't dare let out a sound. Jianghu, I didn't think you'd get what you deserved so quickly. Luo Jian roared with laughter. The hatred he bore towards Jianghu couldn't be resolved easily. With another wave of his sword, he slashed down and left yet another wound on Jianghu's body. Jianghu's eyes were filled with a fierce glare towards Luo Jian as he snarled. Luo Jian, how useless you are! Just because you couldn't beat my fourth brother, you have to fight me. Just wait and see if my fourth brother won't beat the crap out of you. Hearing Jianghu, Luo Jian's face grew dark. Striding forward, he immediately kicked Jianghu. Jianghu's eyes flashed at the opportunity. Just as Luo Jian's leg was about to make contact, his left arm flew out and clasped onto it. With a mighty strength, Jianghu pulled at it. Luo Jian's sense of balance was immediately disrupted, causing him to fall to the ground. Ha! Jianghu roared. His left hand formed a fist as his Saint Force entered his hand. Bringing it down, his fist speeding towards the floored Luo Jian. Luo Jian wasn't slow to react, however. As soon as he hit the floor, he rolled sideways away from Jianghu, causing the Saint Force enhanced fist to miss. Pung! Jianghu's fist smashed against the floor and left behind a giant crater as it sunk into the ground. Jianghu, you really are looking to die. Luo Jian's handsome face went deathly white. With a snarl, the green-colored wind attribute Saint Force condensed into his fist, and almost as if it were lightning, he slammed his fist into Jianghu's stomach. PFF. Jianghu spat out a glob of blood as his body was sent flying backwards. After 4 or 5 meters his body finally descended to the ground with a loud crash. Just as Luo Jian decided to rush forward to beat Jianghu even more, Qingming Xian blocked his path. Luo Jian, you've taught him a lesson already. Our main goal is Changyang Xiang Tian, not Jianghu. At the very least let us beat Changyang Xiang Tian's whereabouts out from him first. Luo Jian slowly nodded his head in silence. If it were someone other than Qingming Xiang, then he would have looked down on the suggestion in contempt. But Qingming Xiang was someone he couldn't afford to offend. Qingming Xiang approached Jianghu with a cold laugh. Jianghu, where is Changyang Xiang Tian? Jianghu crawled up from the ground with some difficulty. His face was pale from blood loss, and his mouth still had a few drops of blood trailing down his face. But since his Saint Force had the earth attribute, his defenses were fairly strong. If it were anyone else, that person wouldn't even have the strength to twitch a finger. Jianghu stared at the people surrounding him and growled. I don't know, but even if I did know, I wouldn't tell any of you. Although he had confidence in Jian Chen's strength, every single person here was at the saint level, and he didn't want his younger brother to fight alone against this group. Qingming Xiang's face grew dark as he said coldly, Jianghu, I'll give you one more chance. Where is Changyang Xiang Tian? Jianghu looked up at him and gave a bloody smile. I already said I don't know. Humph. Qingming Xiang sneered. Smashing his fist against Jianghu's face, he immediately slammed him to the ground once more. Will you speak or not? Jianghu's anger grew tremendously as he crawled up from the floor with the last of his strength. This one won't tell you. Qingming Xiang, you better kill me straight away, or else, I Jianghu, swear that I will make you regret this. Qingming Xiang looked at him with disdain. Jianghu, what right do you have to say that? Could it be because you are the young lord to the Changyang clan? Humph, it is merely the Changyang clan. My Huayun sect cares not about your clan. Qingming Xiang's eyes flashed once more and he cocked his right hand backwards. With a bright red glint, the fist burrowed itself into Jianghu's head. Will you speak? Jianghu's body was badly bruised by the punch. Already his head was starting to drip with blood, but his resolute expression was still there, looking as fierce as always. You and I will go down together. Jianghu couldn't take it anymore. With the yellow light gathering in his left hand, he immediately slashed at Qingming Xiang with his reformed saint weapon. A blazing red sword materialized in Qingming Xiang's hand and he easily blocked Jianghu's attack. Not only did Jianghu suffer from serious injuries, he also was not accustomed to using his left hand to control his axe. Even if he had been completely fine, he definitely wouldn't have been Qingming Xiang's equal anyways. Qingming Xiang looked at Jianghu with a jeering sneer. Jianghu, I recommend you be obedient and tell us where Changyang Xiang Tian, that way you'll feel less pain. Jianghu gasped for air before going oddly calm. He understood that continuing on this route would only lead to disaster. He looked around the area and surveyed his chances before immediately dispersing his saint weapon and started to run towards the sports field. This grove was pretty remote. Normally, very few people passed through it. Thus, whatever happened here would naturally remain unknown to everyone else outside. Jianghu believed that once he ran to a more populated area, Qingming Xiang's group of people definitely wouldn't dare to act. In addition, he had quite a few good friends within the academy. Although Jianghu didn't hope for them to help him resist Qingming Xiang, he knew that they would at least run to notify a teacher, or even the vice headmaster. Seeing Jianghu run off towards the sports field, Qingming Xiang's face changed. Stop him! He called out. The dozen people who initially didn't move immediately set into motion. Quickly chasing after Jianghu, even Qingming Xiang was starting to run at full speeds towards the direction of Jianghu. Jianghu was already seriously wounded, so he was unable to outrun these people. It hadn't even been a few moments before his pursuers had already began to catch up with him. Seeing his enemies quickly catching up to him, Jianghu felt fear creep into his heart as he realized that he would not be able to even make it out of the grove. With this thought, he snarled and immediately stopped in his tracks before retreating back into a different part of the grove. Jianghu suddenly changed directions, making his pursuers feel suspicious. However, soon after, they smiled coldly, and even slowed down their pursuit. The group of people behind stood in a semicircular arc as they took their time to chase after Jianghu. Luo Jian stood next to Qingming Xiang and sneered, based on the direction Jianghu is running towards, he's most likely looking for Changyang Xiang Tian. Qingming Xiang nodded, that is true, so it seems Changyang Xiang Tian is indeed not in the academy. Jianghu used all his strength to run, but his current state was not looking good. His head was drenched with blood while his uniform was caked with blood and dirt, looking quite miserable all over. He truly had no idea where Jianshan was, but he knew that within the grove was a small hillside with a complicated layout and a lush plant life that was suitable for hiding. With the idea of fleeing into the school becoming obsolete, Jianghu's only plausible way to escape was to hide away in the hillside and hope to shake off his enemies. However, Jianghu had forgotten that the place where Jianshan had taught him this morning was currently in the opposite direction. At a waterfall on the hillsides, a uniformed youth was cultivating in a puddle not too far away from the grass. The figure looked quite slender and weak with long black hair that went down to his waist. He looked rather handsome and had a bright glow in his eyes that was similar to the twinkle that reflected off of his sword. The youth had a small, silver sword about 1.3 meters long and 2 fingers wide. On the sword hilt were 2 words written in fancy calligraphy, light wind. The youth calmly stood there. The sword in his hand pointed to the ground, and his whole person was as motionless as a mountain. At that moment, the youth's eyes let out a spark of light. His body fluidly began to move without warning, only mirages from his quick movements could be seen. The silver sword in his hand had entirely become a white blur, and countless shadows of the sword blended together like an illusion that constantly flashed with light. As it moved in the air, only its afterimages could be seen. The youth cried out the words, profound steps, as he moved through the ground quickly as if he was gliding with a great amount of agility and nimbleness. Seeing a rabbit, he quickly stabbed at it with his sword with such an inconceivable speed, anyone that saw him would be astounded. This youth was Jian Chen. After leaving the grove, he had directly arrived at this beautiful landscape, remembering the feeling of the use of the sword that he had experienced before in his previous world. Chapter 61. Increasing murderous intent. Jian Chen quickly moved through the grass. The light wind's sword had already become a streak of white light. He slashed out with his sword at a rapid speed in several directions, his swordplay fast yet sharp. Following Jian Chen's quick movements, the wind scattered dry leaves into the air, fluttering around Jian Chen like gentle dancing butterflies. And at this moment, Jian Chen's swordplay suddenly changed. Although his sword techniques were still fast, but with every stab he made with his sword, the air whistled and left an afterimage that no ordinary person would be able to see easily. A moment after, the rapidly dancing sword in Jian Chen's hands suddenly stopped. But despite after such a long period of intense exercise, he did not even look out of breath and was instead still breathing normally. And at the same time, Jian Chen finally stopped his wild dance. The leaves that were all previously flying around him disintegrated into powder and scattered onto the ground. Only a few leaves were left completely intact, but written on some of them was the word sword. Although the size was different on each of them, it was written clearly and covered the entire area on each leaf. Although, there were some other leaves with the word sword on it that had missing strokes, being either unclear or incomplete. If anyone else saw this sight, then they would surely be amazed to the point of having to pick up their jaw from the ground. This scene was far too astonishing to believe, since the leaves had been floating wildly through the air and even weaved with other leaves at random intervals. Just focusing on one leaf amid the mess of them, constantly changing positions in the air, would definitely cause a person to become dizzy. It would have been even more impossible to think that someone had been able to clearly write the word sword on any of them. Most importantly, the leaves were very fragile and liable to break upon the gentlest of touch. To use a sword to achieve such a feat without leaving a single trace of a tear was as difficult as ascending to the heavens. If people were to find out about what Jian Chen had done, then his name and prestige would be announced and known to the entire Tianyuan continent in the shortest period of time. Watching the still intact leaves gently float down to the ground with a happy smile, Jian Chen muttered to himself, "Although my speed with a sword has deteriorated, my control over it has greatly improved to a level that can't even compare to my past. It's almost as if the sword has become an integral part of my body. Perhaps this is the advantage of this world's saint weapon." Jian Chen's ears suddenly detected a sound. Concentrating on the source, Jian Chen turned towards the opening of the grove while willing his silver sword to fade away. In a short amount of time, the place where Jian Chen looked at started to shake even more before a bloodied figure with a ripped uniform came scurrying out of it. Just one look at the clothes of the person and Jian Chen automatically knew that this was a student of Kargath Academy. But for what reason why the student was bloody all over, Jian Chen was puzzled. There were no magical beasts around, so there was no reason why he would be so injured. Kargath Academy also had strict rules about fighting among students. While giving each other's pointers was allowed, fights that could lead to fatal injuries were not allowed. However, when Jian Chen looked at the student's face, he immediately became stunned. His face froze in a hard expression as he looked at the amount of blood that covered half of the student's face. Jian Chen couldn't believe what he saw, so he opened his mouth to cry out. "Big brother!" came the astonished shout. In a flash, he crossed over 30 meters to arrive at his blood-soaked and injured brother with worry etched on his face. Seeing the horrible wound on Jianghu as well as the blood still flowing from his head, Jian Chen's eyes narrowed in anger. "Big brother, what happened to you? Who did this to you?" An intense murderous intent was emitted from his body the longer he looked at his injured brother. When it came to his brother Jianghu, he was the only person Jian Chen had actually cared about after his mother, because Jianghu had treated him like a true younger brother, so Jian Chen had wanted to repay him for this debt. When he had first come to Kargath Academy, it was Jianghu who had brought him on a tour around the academy grounds and explained the rules to him. He faced huge amounts of danger after running into the magical beast forest to fight and kill a Class 1 magical beast to gift Jian Chen its monster core without any regard for his own personal health. Although Class 1 magical beasts weren't even a threat to Jian Chen, Jianghu did not have as much fighting experience or combat skills as Jian Chen. At the time, Jianghu only had the strength of a peak 10th Saint Force Layer cultivator, so obtaining a Class 1 monster core wouldn't have been an easy task for him. Later on, his brother had even fought against Ka Diyun for him on the platform even after knowing his own strength was lacking in comparison to his opponent, initiating the challenge. Jian Chen had clearly felt that Jianghu cared for him from the bottom of his heart, and so from then on, Jian Chen had always treated him like close family. In his previous life, Jian Chen was a war orphan who had his parents murdered by the enemy army. From his birth, he had no family or friends and never knew the warm embrace of family. But now that God had arranged such a nice life for him, Jian Chen would definitely treasure this, and Jianghu held the second biggest spot in his heart after his mother by Yun Tian. So seeing Jianghu beaten into such a state, Jian Chen's heart flew into a rage that was unprecedented. A single look from him gave the feeling that it could injure someone. Seeing Jian Chen suddenly appear, Jianghu looked at him with a dazed expression. However, his face changed once more as he spoke anxiously. "Fourth brother, why are you here? Hurry up and run. Leave this place, they'll be here in a moment." Jianghu looked impatient. He hadn't thought that he would run into Jian Chen here. Instead of running, Jian Chen's face darkened as he said in a low voice, "Big brother, who in the world beat you to such a state?" The suppressed rage in his tone could have been identified by anyone. Jianghu's hands desperately grabbed onto Jian Chen's body as he continued to speak urgently. "Fourth brother, don't bother asking about that right now and leave this place immediately. Take the long route back to the academy, or else they'll definitely find you." Although he knew Jian Chen's strength was enormous since he had beaten a middle saint, Jianghu did not believe that even Jian Chen could take on a dozen saints, along with Qing Mingxiang, who was an upper saint. But Jian Chen stood right where he was, like a stone statue that could not be budged. No matter what Jianghu did, nothing would sway Jian Chen. With eyes that spoke volumes of his murderous intent, he glared at the grove, waiting for someone to come out. A dozen uniformed students eventually walked into his range of sight, with Luo Jian and Qing Mingxiang walking in front of the group. When they saw Jian Chen, Qing Mingxiang's and Luo Jian's expressions became excited. With a big smile, Luo Jian said, "Xiang Tian, we found you at last. I was beginning to wonder where you had run off to." Without any need for instructions, the group of people immediately surrounded Jian Chen and his brother in a circle. Seeing how he and his brother were surrounded, Jianghu's face grew ugly and gave a small sigh. But other than that, he said nothing. Despite the arrogant manner of the people around him, Jian Chen did not look scared at all, and instead remained calm. It was almost as if he had not even noticed such weak people were surrounding him at all. Jian Chen's face hardened as his eyes swept across the faces of the people around him. Some of them had pained looks on their faces. They felt a chill well up in their hearts, as if Jian Chen's stare was a cold blade that had penetrated their souls. "Who was the one who beat my brother?" Jian Chen shouted, "Step forward." Immediately, a large amount of force was released into the air. Despite the dozen members in front of him, Jian Chen was not scared, and instead held his head up high as a sign of his determination to not give up. Jian Chen's powerful command was accompanied by the release of a strong qi, causing all of them to take an instinctive step backwards. After all, Jian Chen had already been baptized with murderous intent, and the children in front of him who still had the smell of their mother's milk on them would not be able to stand up against it. Realizing that he had been intimidated by Jian Chen's command, Qingming Xiang became angry. He had thought that with his majestic upper saint strength, it would be him that would be doing the intimidation. He couldn't accept the reverse outcome. Changyang Xiang Tian, you're seeking death right now. Qingming Xiang snarled. The fiery red sword appeared in his hands, and gave off a searing red glow as it struck out towards Jian Chen's chest. Humph. Seeing the stab of the sword, Jian Chen's eyes flashed with strong murderous intent. His light wind sword immediately appeared in his right hand, parrying the stab from the other sword as fast as lightning. Ding! A crisp sound rang out as the two swords clashed. Both points of the swords had somehow pressed against each other. Seeing how the 2 points of the sword made contact with each other, Qingming Xiang's eyes widened in shock. He couldn't believe such an event had happened. Even if Jian Chen was his opponent, having the 2 points of the sword meet as both swordsmen stabbed out wasn't something any normal person could replicate, especially considering the difference in size between their two swords, and the speed at which they had thrust their swords forward. And to be able to do it so flawlessly, this was not the sign of a weak person. It signified that a person's saint weapon control had far surpassed that of a typical saint. However, Jian Chen, who had only recently broken through sainthood, had easily achieved such a feat. This made Qingming Xiang skeptical. He had thought that this was a coincidence, but the moment he saw Jian Chen's calm face, his heart immediately dispelled any notions of it being one. Another thing that had startled Qingming Xiang was the sword in Jian Chen's hands. Because the sword had been so tiny in comparison to his, he had thought it was merely an embroidery needle. It was 4 feet long and 2 fingers wide, so it looked quite frail in his eyes. It looked as if the moment a large amount of strength was exerted onto it, the weapon would snap in half. Qingming Xiang could swear that in his entire history of living, this was the first time he had ever seen such a sword. Within the Tianyuan continent, every single saint had a saint weapon that leaned towards a great broadsword, since they had all condensed their saint force into heavy-type weapons. This convention was a fact that was commonly accepted by almost every single cultivationist. If Jian Chen's delicately small sword wasn't able to block against his attack, then Qingming Xiang definitely would have ridiculed Jian Chen. Chapter 62, Jian Chen's strength. Qingming Xiang's face hardened. This time, although opponent was only a newly broken through saint, he was facing his opponent seriously for the first time. Qingming Xiang, since you've beaten my big brother, then don't expect to leave from this place unharmed. Jian Chen stated coldly. Qingming Xiang snorted in response and said, Changyang Xiang Tian, I admit I've underestimated you, but if you want to beat me with your new saint powers, that won't be possible. Jian Chen snorted as he looked on at Qingming Xiang with disdain. Whether or not I have the ability to, come and see. Jian Chen immediately rushed forward. His wrist perfectly controlled the light wind sword and escaped the deadlock with Qingming Xiang's own sword by slapping the side of Qingming Xiang's sword fiercely. Clang! As the sounds of metal rang in the air, Qingming Xiang's sword was forced off to the sides by the light wind sword. Jian Chen had struck out with his sword with such force that Qingming Xiang's sword arm had become numb with pain. At the same time, Jian Chen was in the air, stabbing the light wind sword like a streak of silver light towards Qingming Xiang's chest. Qingming Xiang turned pale with fright. Jian Chen's speed was nearly too quick for him to keep up with. He could only watch as the silver blade approached him with an inconceivable speed, unable to react or even move out of the way. The light wind sword tore through Qingming Xiang's uniform and immediately sunk into his chest. But with Jian Chen's superior control, the sword did not sink in too deep. Immediately after feeling the sharp pain in his chest, Qingming Xiang immediately retreated, causing Jian Chen's sword to be pulled out. Qingming Xiang looked down to where the blood was dripping down onto his uniform with a terrified look. He replayed the moment over and over in his head. He had been unable to dodge the sword at all. In his entire life, he could swear that this was the fastest swordplay he had ever seen. He had even started to feel terrified at Jian Chen's strength, but he just couldn't understand how a newly advanced saint could be this strong. Jian Chen didn't plan on letting him off too lightly though. Immediately using profound steps, he took off like a demon possessed, and with another flash of his silver light, Jian struck out at Qingming Xiang's chest with great speed. Ah! Qingming Xiang let out a miserable shout as he saw blood spray out once more. The blood from the left side of his chest had started to spread over to his right side. The wound was so deep that the bone underneath could be seen as the blood inside his body violently bubbled out, staining the entire top half of his uniform with it. The fury in Jian eyes didn't dissipate at all as he brandished his light wind sword and inflicted wound after wound upon Qingming Xiang's body. The wounds on Qingming Xiang steadily increased, each one looking even more frightening than the one before while going deep into the body. Not only was his body being sliced at, but his entire academy uniform had already started to fall apart, and the remaining cloth becoming redder by the second. Seeing how their strongest member Qingming Xiang was powerless under Jian, the dozen other students became as quiet as wooden chickens. Seeing how Qingming Xiang was endlessly screaming, this had completely overturned what they had thought about him as they looked on with a stunned expression. Luo Jian reacted first, even though he was equally amazed at the display of strength Jian was showing. He had at least 10 other companions who were all at the saint level. With a great increase in courage, he roared, "Everybody charge, even if he's strong, he's still just one person. How could we be afraid of just a single person?" Luo Jian raised his green greatsword with a snarl as he charged towards Jian. Hearing Luo Jian's speech, the students all jolted back to awareness. With a look at one another, the fear that was planted into their hearts by Jian was immediately cast out. With a lift of their great swords, battle axe, large knives and spears, each student charged at Jian with great arrogance. Jian eyes flashed as he watched the people come forward, but he didn't retreat. Taking the initiative and charging in with his light wind sword, he immediately stabbed toward the closest person's stomach. PCH. Jian's sword slid into the student's body with ease. Against him, these students had no battle experience, so there was no way they'd be able to fight back. Herc. Go die. At that moment, Jian had entered the encirclement Jian sneered, and the light wind sword emitted a slight glow as traces of sharp and powerful sword chi began to spread out from the blade. Jian's right hand seemed to turn into a mirage, as the light wind blade seemed to pierce all 4 directions as fast as lightning. Every time he thrust his sword out, he could accurately hit another weapon. After only a short amount of time, Jian had already lashed his sword out 10 times. Ding, ding, ding. A symphony of metal against metal sounds rang out, the sounds all merging together as one. When the light wind sword in Jian's hand collided with the saint weapons, the expressions of all the surrounding students that were all middle saints changed. They immediately retreated, the saint weapons in their hands shaking from the collision. Jian's sword appeared to be extremely small, but it hid a great amount of power behind it. After a single collision with his sword, the saint weapons all vibrated so intensely from the aftershock that it made the students' arms numb. While blocking all of the attacks, Jian's expression didn't change. His movements did not pause at all, and his feet left traces in the ground as he used monster-like movements to charge through the group of people. The light wind sword in his hand danced around in the air at high speeds, turning into a silver glow. The light made it look like there were millions of sword afterimages freezing in the air, disappearing in the blink of an eye. Ah! Ah! With Jian's monster-like movements, sharp shouts of pain rang out in the air. The desolate cries could make any weaker-hearted people absolutely horrified, and a chilliness began to arise in the air. The blood-covered Changyang who stood on the side, staring in a daze at the Jian constantly moving about like a demon, causing the students to cry out in shock. At the moment, his mind had already completely ground to a halt, he had already completely lost his cognitive abilities. At that moment, the dozens of students had already all fallen to the ground. Their ashen faces were filled with pain, and their originally perfectly clean and tidy uniforms were now torn all over the place. Each tear was dripping with blood, dyeing their entire uniforms crimson. Moreover, that white light continuously flashed over their bodies, quickly increasing the number of wounds on their bodies. From their upper torso down to their legs, their entire bodies were covered with frightening wounds. Their blood flowed like rivers out from their injuries, and they quickly began to look like they were made of blood. Jian Chen circled the students at high speeds. The light wind sword in Jian Chen's hands slashed at their bodies continuously, causing splashes of blood and torn pieces of clothing to fly out in the air. Jianghu's injuries greatly affected Jian Chen's emotions. Although Jian Chen didn't kill these dozens of students, he would definitely not let them go lightly. If these people weren't attending the same school as Jian Chen was, and if Jian Chen wasn't worried about stirring trouble within their families, he would definitely end their lives without hesitation. Senior Changyang Xiang Tian, please have mercy on us. We won't dare to do this ever again. Senior Changyang Xiang Tian, please let us go this time. We won't ever do it again. Finally, the people could no longer endure the torture, and had begun to beg for mercy. As soon as one person began to cry out, the others all started to plead for their lives as well. However, a few of the more temperamental people were still gritting their teeth and holding themselves back. They had also considered running, but both their legs and arms were currently sporting terrifying wounds. The slightest movement caused them to bite down in pain. There was no way they could run. At the least, they didn't have the willpower to endure such an intense pain. Jian Chen ceased his movements. His expression was cold and indifferent, he didn't have a hint of blush on his cheeks, and his breathing was calm. However, the light wind sword in his hand was dripping with fresh blood. Jian Chen's body was as tall and straight as a mountain, immovable in his spot. His eyes flashed coldly as if they seemed to be able to pierce through one's soul. He slowly swept his gaze across the dozen students lying on the ground and said, I can let you guys go, but you have to answer this. Who injured my older brother? It's Lord Cheng, Luo Jian, and Ka Di Yun. Right, it was those three that had injured Jianghu. Jianghu was wounded by those three. We didn't do anything at all. The dozen youths struggled to say their excuses first, afraid that if they were too slow in their responses, Jian Chen would be discontent. At the moment, they had already long abandoned any thoughts of retaliation against Jian Chen, and wholeheartedly regretted their actions. Among them, half of the people had had their monster cores taken away by Jian Chen in the forest. The other half had no enmity towards Jian Chen, and had merely been gathered by Qingming Xiang. Jian Chen's eyes flashed fiercely. He coldly glared at Qingming Xiang, Luo Jian, and Ka Di Yun, a powerful murderous intent evident in his gaze. Under Jian Chen's murderous gaze, Qingming Xiang and the other two felt chills in their hearts, and all showed terrified expressions. Chapter 63, Incoming Disaster. Changyang Xiang Tian, what are you going to doing? Let us go immediately. Let's forget about the events that happened today, otherwise, just you wait for my Huayun sect to come for revenge. Qingming Xiang said sternly. Even an idiot could tell with one look that Jian Chen didn't plan on letting them go that easily. Right now, Qingming Xiang wanted nothing else but to leave this place and plot his revenge for another day. Jian Chen sneered, let you go? It won't be that easy. Hearing this, Qingming Xiang and the two others' face dropped. Ka Dian spoke with a gloomy voice, Changyang Xiang Tian, we may have injured your brother, but now you have injured us, let us wipe the slate clean. Jian Chen slowly walked towards the three with his light wind sword emitting sword qi. The three watched as the sword slowly enveloped itself in a bright glow of silver as if it was being eaten by it. A clean slate? How could it be that easy? Today, you three will leave an arm behind, and if there is another time in the future, then it will be your life. Jian Chen had already arrived in front of Ka Di Yun, his light wind sword already swishing down in an arc like silver lightning towards Ka Di Yun's shoulder. Ah! Ka Di Yun let out a desolate scream as the intense feeling of pain racked his face. Already all color had drained away from it. A fountain of blood sprayed out of the stump from where his right arm originally was as it flopped down onto the ground lifeless. Jian Chen had chopped off Ka Di Yun's right arm. Qingming Xiang and Luo Jian's face immediately changed as they watched with a tremble. Another look at the severed arm, and then at Ka Di Yun's screaming figure had caused them to become deathly white in the face. The 10 other students looked at Jian Chen with fear, this type of development was something they were not expecting to see. Who would have known that he was this merciless and severed someone's arm without hesitation? This cruel display had brought them no small amount of anxiety and fear. But there was a small shimmer of hope. They had fortunately not fought against Jianghu. If it were not for that small fact, then they had no doubt that they would be joining Luo Jian, Qingming Xiang, and Ka Diyun amongst the ranks of losing an arm. Jian Chen had treated the event as if it was an insignificant matter, his face not revealing any emotion whatsoever during the act. Whether it was the splattered blood on the ground or Ka Diyun's screams of pain, it had no effect on him. Instead, he looked at Luo Jian and walked closer towards him with his bloody sword. As Jian Chen approached, fear filled Luo Jian's face. Ignoring the pain from his wounds, he began to crawl backwards away from Jian Chen at a snail-like pace while crying, "Changyang Xiang Tian, what are you doing? Don't come any closer." Jian Chen kept his slow pace as he walked towards Luo Jian. With an icy stare that revealed no mercy in his eyes, he slowly raised his light wind sword. Seeing Jian Chen lift his silver sword, Luo Jian became even more terrified. He had long since lost his arrogant attitude and started to plead to him, "Changyang Xiang Tian, please, I beg of you, please don't cut off my arm. If you let me go, Luo Jian, swear that in the future I will definitely repay you." Jian Chen showed no signs of stopping. Swinging his sword in another arc of silver light, he swiftly cut off Luo Jian's arm under the owner's disbelieving eye. "Ah!" A terrified scream came out from Luo Jian as his right arm was separated from his shoulder, causing blood to come spraying out onto the ground. "Changyang Xiang Tian, I definitely won't let you go," Luo Jian grimaced as he used his anger to roar in anger. Already his eyes became bloodshot as he stared at Jian Chen with intense hatred. Jian Chen didn't take any notice of Luo Jian's cry, and instead walked off towards Qingming Xiang. Qingming Xiang's face was still a deathly white color. There was only regret in his heart as he realized his strength was weaker than Jian Chen's. If it weren't for the fact that he had a dozen other people at the saint level, he wouldn't have been forced into such a difficult situation. Seeing the still approaching figure of Luo Jian, Qingming Xiang couldn't quell the feeling of absolute dread in his heart as he tried to calm down. "Changyang Xiang Tian, if you don't want to bring your clan into this." Hearing Qingming Xiang's words immediately caused a reaction from Jian Chen. A glare appeared on his eyes as he immediately flashed forward to where Qingming Xiang was. Before he could even finish his sentence, Jian Chen had already lopped off his right arm. Qingming Xiang stifled a shout as his face flashed with pain. He was not like Ka Diyun or Luo Jian, who had both screamed. The scream of pain had already been suppressed in his throat, but his face was still warped into a different expression. It would seem that his pain threshold was greater than the other two. Jian Chen's ice-cold gaze landed on the three people and he coldly said, "Today, I cut off your arm, but if there's a next time, I will take your life. Don't think I am bluffing, I will be true to my word." Jian Chen's eyes swept over to where the other students laid. As he looked at each student, they stared down at the ground in fear. Whenever Jian Chen had looked at them with his bloody sword, none of them had even the smallest idea of trying to get revenge. Jian Chen looked at his bloody light wind sword, and with a single thought, he held the sword with the point facing downwards. All of the blood accumulated on the sword started to accumulate at the tip of the sword and slowly started to drip down onto the dusty earth, restoring the light wind sword to its original bright glory. With the light wind sword finally clean, Jian Chen returned to where Changyang was. After seeing his bloody brother, the icy stare on Jian Chen's face softened as he said with concern, "Big brother, let's go back now." Changyang nodded his head dumbfounded. Right now his eyes were wide open after watching the entire fight that had just happened. Even though he had personally witnessed Jian Chen's victory, he was still having a hard time in believing it. Jian Chen lent a hand towards the bloody Changyang and the both turned around to walk back to his dorm by a secluded road. But despite this, the both of them would still see enough people that would spread the news that Changyang was heavily injured around the academy. Not long after Jian Chen had returned back to his room, the students lent a hand towards the three injured students and began their slow walk towards the academy. The moment the academy came into sight, Everyone went into an uproar, especially for the 3 students each missing an arm. Nobody could believe their eyes at what they had seen. The news of the injured students spread across the academy with rapid speed. The news had even spread to the teachers, who immediately reported it to the vice headmaster Biyao. When Biyao had heard that Qingming Xiang, Luo Jian, and Ka Diyun had their arms cut off, he placed extra importance on the matters and immediately relayed them to the medical experts of the academy. As Biyao arrived at the medicinal wing of the academy, a large group of people had already gathered on the outside as they clamored around for news. Vice Headmaster Chang Biyao pushed aside the crowd of students, and directly forced his way up to the medicinal wing to see the situation. There were currently a dozen blood-covered students lying on stretchers. In the middle of the room stood 2 middle-aged men and a woman currently closing their eyes. They had their hands spread out above 3 of the students, emitting a milky white light from their hands that enveloped these students. Shrouded in milky white rays of light, the 3 students' terrifying wounds were being quickly sealed before their very eyes. The speed of the healing was unfathomably fast, and within a short breath, the 3 students' wounds had already disappeared without a trace. Once the wounds disappeared, the expressions on the 3 students' faces clearly changed. Now they showed no traces of pain. On the contrary, they looked a lot more relaxed now. At the same time, one could see traces of alarm in the depths of their eyes. After treating the 3 students, the 2 men and 1 woman showed their humble appreciation to Biyao. Soon after, they continued to treat the remaining dozen or more students in the middle. The vice headmaster had an ugly expression on his face as his gaze swept across the dozen students. His gaze lingered for an especially long time on Qingming Xiang and the other 2 that had lost their right arms. His expression fell as he bellowed, "What happened here? Who wounded you to this extent? Could it be that you encountered someone from outside? Humph, don't they know that everything within this 100-kilometer perimeter is Kargath Academy's territory? To think that someone would dare to enter Kargath Academy and injure its students, this is really absurd." Biyao was fuming. It was very obvious that he thought that Qingming Xiang and the other dozen students had been hurt by some people from the outside. Vice headmaster, it was Changyang Xiantian. "We were all injured by Changyang Xiantian," a student weakly cried. "That's right, Vice Headmaster, you have to demand justice for us. Changyang Xiantian not only heavily injured us, but he even cut off the arms of Lord Cheng and the 2 others." Vice Headmaster Biyao was completely shocked into a daze by these words. He only felt disbelief. Among these dozen students, the weakest person was at least a lower saint. There were even some middle saints, and 1 upper saint among them. With such a lineup, even if they encountered a great saint, they would still definitely be able to overwhelm him. He really couldn't believe that so many people had actually been beaten black and blue by a freshman that had only just broken through saint level a few days ago. Biyao couldn't accept this fact at all. After confirming what actually happened, Biyao's expression immediately grew serious. His heart had already sank to the utmost degree. He immediately looked for the headmaster. What happened here was far too complicated for Biyao to resolve. After Biyao recounted the entire situation to the headmaster lost his calm. He jumped up from his chair with an expression of utter shock and said, "What? Is what you said really true? Qingming Xiang, Luo Jian, and Ka Diyun all had their arms cut off by Changyang Xiangtian?" "Yes, headmaster, I personally made a trip to see." "The 3 individuals' arms were indeed cut off," said Biyao solemnly. "Ai," the headmaster sighed heavily and said, "This time the situation has worsened. This Changyang Xiangtian is far too impulsive. Ka Di clan and Luo clan are of no problem. However, Huayun sect is not someone the Changyang clan can afford to offend. Headmaster, what should we do now? Our Jessan kingdom had much difficulty producing a genius like Changyang Xiangtian. We can't just stand by and watch a genius with limitless potential die when he had not yet finished maturing. Otherwise, this would really be too major a loss for Jessan kingdom." Vice Headmaster Biyao said in a heavy tone. Chapter 64, Goodbye Chang. By the headmaster murmured quietly, "What you said is correct, Changyang Xiangtian must be protected. Bai En, you stay here and resolve the matters in the medicinal building. I will go to the Changyang clan immediately. Otherwise, if we were to wait for the experts of the Huayun sect to arrive, the situation will become too terrible. After, the headmaster walked towards the frame of the window and jumped out of it. Then, just like a big bird, he immediately flew into the sky with frightening speed and flew off into the horizon. Seeing the headmaster disappear into the horizon, Bai En let loose a sigh. Changyang Xiang Tian has really disturbed the peace this time. If he had only just beaten them, then the situation wouldn't be that bad, but he had to go and cut off Qingming Xiang's arm. Although it's not like the arm can't be reattached, but the strength needed for this is too high. Even the Huayun sect cannot invite a rank 7 Radiant Saint Master with ease. By this point, the entire academy had heard about the 3 students who had their arms chopped off by Changyang Xiang Tian. It was the topic of discussion amongst every student, and with that, Changyang Xiang Tian's strength had created another shock between the teachers and students. While the academy was talking about that, Jianshen sat cross-legged on his bed as he began to reflect upon his actions. He knew in his heart that by chopping off the arms of Qingming Xiang, Luo Jian, and Ka Diyun, he had brought upon a great deal of trouble on himself. However, he didn't regret what he had done at all, so all he could do right now was ponder deeply on how he could deal with the wrath of the 3 groups. The day went by quickly and soon became night time. Dong dong dong. A loud knocking sound came from the other side of Jian Chen's room. Hearing the sound, the cross-legged Jian Chen slowly opened his eyes. Looking down to see the various Class 1 monster cores without energy, he sighed silently before looking towards the door. Who is it? Changyang Xiang Tian, this is Vice Headmaster Chang Bai En. Came Bai En's familiar voice from outside the door. Jian Chen immediately got off his bed and walked over to open the door. Vice Headmaster Chang Bai En was standing right outside his door, with an unsightly expression. Vice Headmaster, what's wrong? Jian Chen asked in a conversational tone. He already guessed what the Vice Headmaster had come for, but his heart was still extremely calm and unwavering. Vice Headmaster Chang Bai En glanced at Jian Chen with a complicated look inside. Changyang Xiang Tian, please pack up, then immediately follow me to the headmaster's office. Oh. Jian Chen indifferently replied. He did not say anything afterwards, and quietly went back to his room to pack up his things. Jian Chen didn't have many belongings. He grabbed some of his own medicines and stored them into his space belt. Then he followed Bai En to the center of the academy where the single, lone tower stood. Ah, look over there, isn't that Changyang Xiang Tian? It is, looks like he's walking together with the vice headmaster. Maybe he received a super strict punishment. As they walked through the sports field, a crowd of students started to gather and chatter amongst themselves. Jian Chen turned a deaf ear to the discussions that had arisen around him. He followed behind Vice Headmaster Bai En, and they soon arrived at the central tower, and directly entered the headmaster's office. Right next to the Vice Headmaster's table sat 2 elders. One of them was a relieved headmaster while the other elder was wearing a cyan-colored pao and had long black hair that was tied back. From behind the desk, the old man looked quite ordinary, just like any other old man. Headmaster, Changyang Xiang Tian has been brought. Vice Headmaster greeted politely. Hearing this, the headmaster's gaze immediately settled onto Jian Chen, and he said in a calm voice, Bai En, you may leave. Yes, sir. Bai En quickly left. At that moment, the only people left inside the office were Jian Chen and Kargath Academy's headmaster, as well as an elder in a blue/green robe. Ever since Jian Chen first entered, his line of vision had been fixed on the blue/green clad elder. This elder wasn't any stranger to Jian Chen, it was Changyang clan's butler, Chang Bai. Chang Bai, why have you come? Jian Chen said while looking at the elder. Chang Bai gave a complicated look at Jian Chen before sighing. Fourth Master, from all of your days at Kargath Academy, we have been watching you and your achievements. Whether it be your mother or father, they both feel extremely proud, but this act of yours today was too impulsive. Jian Chen naturally understood what Chang Bai was saying, and said firmly, Chang Bai, I don't regret anything. They brought this onto themselves. My older brother hadn't offended them in any way, but they still heavily injured him. Even if I relived this experience, would still do the same thing. Changbai sighed, "Fourth master, I don't disagree with your methods. After all, in the Tianyuan continent, it is strength that rules over others. Although their strength was weaker than yours, you did not think about the powers they had backing them up. If it was just the Kadi clan or Luo clan, then our Changyang clan would not have much trouble with dealing with them, but Xingming Xiang is the treasured son of the Huayun sect's leader. The Huayun sect holds the biggest amount of power in the Jessen kingdom after the royal family, so this is a power the Changyang clan cannot afford to provoke. Changyang Xiang Tian, the Huayun sect's strength is quite formidable. Although they aren't as powerful as the royal family, even the royal family is afraid of any consequences from meddling with them. Currently, among the top 6 experts in Jessen kingdom, the Huayun sect alone takes up 2 of those spots. The headmaster said with a serious expression. Jian Chen's expression also gradually grew more serious at these words. At that moment, a light knock came from outside the door. A respectful voice rang out from outside, "Respected headmaster, Changyang Hu has been brought." "Enter," the headmaster said. The door opened, and a teacher walked in leading Changyang Hu. Changyang Hu was currently wearing a new academy uniform, but scars still clearly covered his face. "Changbai." Changyang Hu yelled the moment he walked in. He was unable to contain his emotions as he spoke with astonishment. The teacher didn't enter the headmaster's office. After sending Changyang Hu in, and sending the headmaster his respects, he lightly closed the door and left. Changbai's eyes lingered onto the scar on Changyang Hu's face. His pair of ordinary-looking eyes finally revealed some fury in them. Without any other external movements, he spoke, "Eldest master, you've suffered greatly." Changyang Hu shook his head without any mind, and said, "It's just a bit of injury, nothing major." "However, Changbai, why did you come to the academy?" Changyang Hu asked in confusion. Changbai's face didn't react in the slightest, and instead said gently, "Eldest master, fourth master, you should go pick up the rest of your things." Jian Chen quietly nodded without saying a word. "I've already packed everything, Changbai, did you come to take me away?" Changyang Hu asked in a reluctant tone. Changbai nodded, "Correct, I've come today to pick you 2 up and depart from the academy. It would be unwise for you 2 to continue living at Kargath Academy." Hearing this, Changyang Hu's expression became dark. He had spent quite a long time at Kargath Academy, and had already developed special feelings of attachment towards it. "Changyang Hu, Changyang Xiang Tian, you 2 should first head out. I still have a few things I want to discuss with Changbai," the headmaster said. Jian Chen and Changyang Hu didn't have any objections, and they immediately turned around to walk out of the headmaster's office. Jian Chen and Changyang Hu weren't kept waiting for long. Changbai came out from the headmaster's office soon after. However, when he looked at the 2, his face changed to one of happiness. Jian Chen and Changyang Hu followed Changbai down the tower, and got onto the flying-type magical beast to leave Kargath Academy. It directly flew up into the air, and began heading towards Lore City. Jian Chen and Changyang Hu didn't speak on the magical beast's back. While the 2 were being rushed home, the both of them seemed to be extremely heavy-hearted. Within Jian Chen's head, he couldn't help but to think about the motherly affections he had received. Although Jian Chen wasn't a kid in his mind, he had never dealt with such an experience before, and so this motherly affection was a new thing, so Jian Chen had a very low resistance towards this. In Jian Chen's mind, he could not help but recall his previous life in the Changyang household. His mother had been wholeheartedly caring towards him, and had loved him dearly every step of his life. This made Jian Chen's frozen heart, which had never experienced a mother's love before, become a sea of warmth, and he enjoyed and treasured this feeling. Time quietly passed as the Class 4 magical beast soared through the air at high speeds and caused the wind to constantly whistle in Jian Chen's ear. Jian Chen's black, waist-length hair was blown messily in the air as it danced in the wind. Especially now that he had a handsome and dashing appearance, he looked as confident as ever as he rode on top of the flying magical beast with ease. The flying magical beast crossed over many different villages and cities under the guise of the pitch-dark skies. After a few hours of flying 1,000 kilometers above the ground, they finally arrived at Lore City. Under the control of Changbai, the eagle beast descended onto the grounds of the Changyang mansion. The servants who managed the rear courts had long since left the area, leaving behind only the most loyal of guardsmen. A large gust of wind descended upon the courtyards as the eagle beast came down from the skies and landed onto the ground as the three males climbed down from it. A group of people had already gathered around the eagle beast with a middle-aged man wearing a black and white pao leading the group. This was the master of Changyang Mansion and the father of Jian Chen, Changyang Ba. By his side were four very beautiful women, Jian Chen's mother by Yun Tian and his three aunts. Standing by his fourth aunt's side was a girl who looked to be around 18 years old. This was his second sister he hadn't seen in a few months, Changyang Mingyu. Standing right next to her was another person who looked to be around Jian Chen's age. It was Changyang Ku, his third brother. However, in Changyang Ku's eyes was a look of mirth as if he was happy to see Jian Chen in such misery after leaving Kargath Academy. Standing behind the family were a few middle-aged men and elders. They were high-ranking members of the clan, but each one of them had a grave expression on their faces as they looked at Jian Chen with a complicated stare. Some looked at him with happiness, others with an expectant expression, and some who just sighed. Changbai walked towards Changyang Ba and gave a small smile. "Clan leader, I have not failed you. I have brought the eldest master and fourth master back home safely," he stated. Changyang Ba looked at Changbai and clasped his hands together. "Changbai, thank you very much for your trouble. Clan leader is being too courteous. This is just part of my duty," Changbai said. Changyang Ba swept his gaze across Jian Chen and Changyang Hu. His eyes held both expressions of gratification and admiration as he looked at Jian Chen, and his expression had also become excited, although it was still nevertheless worried. Finally, he let out a long sigh and said, "Xiang Er, Hu, both of you come with me to the main hall." Changyang Ba turned around and began to walk out. Chapter 65. The People from the Imperial Palace. 1. Jian Chen and Changyang Hu returned to their respective mother's side and walked with the others towards the main hall of the Changyang mansion. Hu, you've suffered greatly at the academy, just look at your scars." On the way, Jian Chen's eldest aunt, Jing Long, looked at the scars on Changyang Hu's face with eyes wet with tears that never seemed to cease. Changyang Hu could only laugh as he replied, "Mother, these are only small injuries, nothing to worry about. It was a good thing fourth brother found me, otherwise, your child would have been left unable to even move from bed." Hearing this, Jing Long turned her head to look at Jian Chen with a gentle smile on her face. "Xiang Tian, I really must thank you for helping Hu." Jian Chen smiled back. "Eldest aunt, what are you saying? If my big brother has a problem, of course I'd help. Besides, this happened because of me and big brother was caught up into it. As long as eldest aunt doesn't blame me, then I be happy enough." Jing Long still had a smile on her face. "Xiang Tian, you're becoming more and more intelligent. You're almost becoming just like Hu now." Praise from eldest aunt. Jian Chen laughed. He could clearly tell that eldest aunt Jing Long's attitude towards him had improved. She was no longer so solemn and unmoving towards him. No longer was she like before, always wearing a neutral face. "Mother, you should say it right, fourth brother's strength is really amazing. Before he was even a saint, he could easily hunt and kill Class 2 magical beasts. And after he did become one, even the combined powers of the geniuses of cultivation of Kargath Academy, despite having the genius upper Saint Xing Ming Xiang among their ranks, were beaten in under 3 minutes. The 10 other who followed them were also easily beaten up by fourth brother as well." Changyang Hu was clearly excited, his voice was rising in volume as he spoke. "Mother, you didn't see the fight, but I did. Although fourth brother was by himself, he had beaten a dozen people until they were covered with bruises in the blink of an eye. These dozen people were all at the rank of a saint at the very least, but against fourth brother, they were no match at all." Hearing this, Jian Chen's mother Bai Yun Tian beamed with happiness as she looked at her son with loving affection. Humph. A cold sneer came from the side. It was from Jian Chen's third aunt Bai Yu Shuang, who continued to say, "Amazing is amazing," but it was this amazingness that provoked the Huayan sect. Changyang Xiang Tian's amazingness is practically inviting danger to our Changyang mansion. Jian Chen's eyebrows furrowed together. His third aunt Bai Yu Shuang had always treated him with prejudice since he was young. Jian Chen's mother, Bai Yun Tian, was extremely discontent. However, the one that had caused trouble was her own son, and even she slightly felt that he was in the wrong. In addition, his relationship with Bai Yu Shuang was never good. Thus, she couldn't claim he wasn't guilty either, otherwise the little feud between the two would only grow. Forget it, third sister. What's happened has already happened. Discussing it now isn't of any use. What we should do now is to properly consider how we should deal with it. Jian Chen's second aunt Yu Feng Yan explained. Forget it, third sister. After all, Xiang Tian stirred up this trouble for the sake of saving Hu. You can't blame everything on Xiang Tian. Jing Long sided with Jian Chen. Seeing that there were actually two people supporting Jian Chen, Bai Yu Shuang could only snort and stay silent. Bai Yun Tian sighed, her gaze held both love and worry as she looked at Jian Chen and said, Xiang heir, we know of all of your achievements at Kargath Academy. You are my pride and glory, but I also think that your actions this time were too brash. To think that you even cut off the Huyun sect leader's son's arm. Do you know that with this, you've not only caused major trouble for yourself, but you've also dragged the entire Changyang clan in with you as well? A trace of guilt was shown on Jian Chen's face as he said, Sorry mother, I have brought a great trouble to our clan. Xiang Tian, what happened has already happened. You should stop blaming yourself. Right now we need to go the main hall quickly to discuss how to settle this conflict. Second aunt then closed her mouth. After that, the group started to pick up their pace as they headed towards the main hall. At this moment within a splendid palace, the Emperor of Jessen Kingdom held a letter in the middle of his hands. Creasing together his eyebrows, he let out a long sigh before saying, This Changyang Xiang Tian is truly too impulsive. He has made a great mistake by cutting off the right arm of the Huayan sect's Qingming Xiang. This type of situation is something the Changyang clan cannot stand up against. The Emperor released the letter and watched it drop to the table. Servant, call the armored forces commander Biyao to come quickly. Yes, your majesty. As the Emperor gave out his command, the court eunuch hurried out to obey his orders. Soon enough, a black armored middle-aged man came walking into the room. This man's appearance was rather ordinary looking, but he had a resolute expression on his face. His eyes shined brightly below his scarred face. The scars ran across his entire forehead, causing people to jump at his terrifying appearance. The man walked towards the emperor before stopping 10 meters away from him. Your Majesty, this servant knows not why he has been called here. The emperor slowly stood up as he grabbed the letter in his hand and handed it to the man. Take a look. Hearing this, the middle-aged male wearing black armor received the letter from the emperor and opened it to begin reading. After he finished, his expression had become extremely heavy. I hadn't imagined that he would actually stir up so much trouble. The black-armored man let out a long sigh as his expression became anxious. The younger generations always seem to be so arrogant and impulsive. The emperor sighed, Biyao, ever since you joined the armored forces 20 years ago, you've never returned back to your homeland. Take this opportunity today and visit. Yes, your majesty. A complex look flashed in the armored youth's eyes. The emperor's expression suddenly turned serious as he said, Biyao, when you return this time, you must persuade Changyang clan's people to send Changyang Xiang Tian over here as quickly as possible. Otherwise, once the Huayun sect goes looking for them, the conflict will grow even more. Only by sending Changyang Xiang Tian away, in addition to us mediating between them, will the conflict between the Changyang clan and the Huayun sect be temporarily stabilized. Right now, all of the neighboring nations are already beginning to stir. It seems that they've never let go of the idea of attacking my Gisan kingdom's territory. At a moment as critical as this, nothing can be allowed to occur within the kingdom. Otherwise, the end result will be too horrible to even think about. Changyang Xiang Tian is a genius from the heavens with unlimited potential. His future prospects truly cannot be measured, may be the only source of hope that Gisan kingdom has ever had in the last few hundred years. For this reason, Changyang Xiang Tian must be protected at all costs. Although we cannot guarantee his future achievements will go smoothly, we cannot allow him to get involved in an accident within our Gisan kingdom. The emperor spoke with a hard face. Hearing this, the armored youth showed a proud and joyous expression. He suppressed the rising emotions within his heart and said, "Young Majesty, Biyao understands what he should do now." The emperor nodded his head and said, "Biyao, there's no time to lose. You must head out to Changyang Mansion immediately. With your strength, you should be able to arrive there before sunrise." "Yes, Your Majesty." Within the great halls of the Changyang Mansion, Changyang Ba sat down onto his throne, with Jian Chen on one side and his fellow wives on the other side. Sitting a few steps below was the relieved housekeeper Chang Bai. Changyang Ba had a look of worry on his face as he looked at his son Jian Chen. Xiang Er's situation at Kargath Academy should be known to everyone here already. The Huayun sect leader's son had his right arm cut off, so the Huayun sect will definitely not let this matter go. Please offer up what solutions you may have. Hearing this, everyone in the hall went silent. The Huayun sect was the biggest force of power aside from the royal family in the Gisan kingdom and didn't fear the emperor's power at all. The Changyang clan wouldn't be able to resist their sect since Qingming Xiang was like a treasured son of the sect leader. Since he was a genius that far exceeded the others, to have his arm chopped off by Jian Chen would definitely influence his future road of achievements. It could be said with no exaggeration that Jian Chen had completely destroyed Qingming Xiang. So for that reason everyone knew within their hearts that there would be no way for the Huayun sect to forgive this matter. Everyone was still silent before finally a 60-year-old elder said, "The best way to solve this problem is to find and invite a Radiant Saint Master to help repair Qingming Xiang's arm." However, only a rank 7 Radiant Saint Master would have the power to do something on this level. Our Changyang clan would not be able to easily call on such a person. Not only that, but rank 7 Radiant Saint Masters are extremely rare within the Tianyuan continent and many of them are wanderers. It would be easier to climb to the heavens than to find one, so the possibility of healing Qingming Xiang's arm is practically zero. What you're saying is correct. In my opinion, our only chance of appeasing the anger of the Huayun sect aside from finding a Radiant Saint Master is to have the Emperor and the royal family back us up. However, the Huayun sect would definitely not give up their chances. What is guaranteed is that the fourth master will not be easy to protect. A middle-aged person said. Standing by the middle-aged man were a few other elders who had high amounts of influence within the clan. They have long since heard about Jian Chen's achievements within the academy, and in their hearts, they had already started to place their hopes for the clan's survivals onto Jian Chen. So even though the clan was being troubled by a big problem, no one had blamed him for it and instead tried their best to find ways to protect him. Not only that, but with the arranged marriage between him and Princess Galan, then after the marriage, the Changyang clan would be able to rise higher in power. If only the ancestor was still here. An elder sighed helplessly. Hearing this, Chang Bai's eyes lit up. That's right, if the master was here, then our clan wouldn't need to assemble here today to figure out a solution. It's a shame, the master has already been gone for dozens of years without any notice. We don't even know if he is alive or not. The crowd went silent after hearing that. Jian Chen's heart pulsed after hearing Chang Bai talk. From his few years at the Changyang mansion, he had never once heard about this ancestor or Chang Bai's master come up as a topic before. Although he had only just heard about the two, he was sure in his heart that these two people were actually very strong and had power incomparable to anyone else. Most likely the two were not afraid of the Huayun sect and were former elders of the clan. Jian Chen didn't bother to think about his question long, and immediately dismissed it from his mind. Seeing how the hall was still silent, Jian Chen hesitated slightly before saying, "Father, it would be better for Changbai's eagle beast to send me out. As long as I do not remain within Changyang Mansion, I am sure the Huayun sect will not act upon the clan if they truly do come. No. Absolutely not. The moment Jianchen spoke, Bai Yun Tian and Changyang Ba's voices both simultaneously rose up in objection. Both of Bai Yun Tian's hands tightly grasped onto Jian Chen's own hands as her eyes gradually became misty before tears started to stream down her face. She cried, "Xiang heir, don't say such foolish things. The Tianyuan continent is very dangerous, and it's not as easygoing as you think it is. You have not yet explored the world, so you don't know what rules must be followed in order to survive. Your strength is still too low, mother will definitely not let you go on such a foolish endeavor." Chapter 66, The People from the Imperial Palace, 2, That's right, Xiang heir, what your mother said is correct. The world isn't as peaceful as the academy is, it's filled with slaughter. And with your current strength, being able to survive won't be that easy. Forget about this idea, I absolutely won't agree to it. Changyang Ba said seriously. Although he spoke in an ordinary tone, he had been firm in rejecting Jian Chen's idea. Jian Chen already knew that it would be hard to get his family to agree to this plan, but he continued to speak, "Father, mother, please don't worry about me. Your son may not be strong, but I am still able to protect myself. I've read many books from the academy library, and so I have some familiarity on how to survive within the Tianyuan continent. Once your child leaves Changyang Mansion, then that'll be one less problem for the clan. Fourth Master, the situation isn't as simple as you think. If the Huayun sect were to find out that you are no longer within the Changyang Mansion, then I'm afraid that they would send out many of their numbers to pursue you. And with the Huayun sect's power, you won't be hard to locate." A white-haired elder spoke. In his heart, he had placed Jian Chen as the hope for the clan's future, and definitely did not want to see him die prematurely. He was a 15-year-old saint who was stronger than an upper-level saint, and bordered along the powers of a great saint. This meant that he was a genius from the heavens that would shake the entire Tianyuan continent. To some of the men here, Jian Chen was no longer just a regular person, but a glowing human treasure that could give them boundless wealth. For that reason, within the hearts of the high-ranked elders, they all just wanted to protect Jian Chen so he wouldn't suffer a blow to his future potential. Jian Chen let loose a big smile. "Everyone doesn't need to worry, I've read up about a lot about the continent, so I'm sure that I can keep away from the Huayun sect's grasp." "Definitely not, Xiang heir. This is still too risky, it's not worth the trouble." Changyang Ba immediately shot down the proposal. "Xiang heir, don't worry about a thing. While the Huayun sect may be very strong, our Changyang clan won't be such an easy pushover, and although our ancestor has been gone for some years, his reputation is still widely known. The Huayun sect wouldn't dare to be so forward with our clan. So just stay within the mansion, I will do my best to protect you." Jian Chen inwardly sighed to himself. With such a resolute objection, there would be no way for him to convince his father otherwise. "That's right, Xiang heir, this idea of yours is far too risky. Even if you could escape from the Huayun sect, the life of the Tianyuan continent is not as straightforward and simple as the books say. Please just obediently stay at Changyang Mansion. Your father and your uncles will do their best to protect you." Bai Yin Tian gently pleaded with Jian Chen. "Cool." Changyang Ba cleared his voice. "That's enough, let's first talk about how we'll deal with the Huayun sect. I'm sure they have already heard about this situation and will arrive at Lore City soon, so we are pressed for time." Changyang Ba stated once more. The entire crowd within the main hall went silent as they all started to think about the situation. If His Majesty helps us, then that means the arranged wedding between the Fourth Master and Princess Galan is still on. So in the end, the Fourth Master will still be the son-in-law to the Emperor, so I'm sure His Majesty won't sit around and do nothing. Someone said. Changbai nodded his head in contemplation and said, "If His Majesty wants to support us, then he could temporarily suppress this situation, but this will no doubt bring His Majesty quite a headache. It is unfortunate timing right now as well, the neighboring countries have been inconspicuously sending soldiers to the borders. Most likely, they want to invade the richly fertile lands of the Joseon kingdom. So right now, His Majesty definitely would not want to get onto the bad side of the Huayun sect. After all, this is a matter of life or death for the kingdom. Without the 2 heaven saint masters from the Huayun sect, even the strongest fighters would be hard-pressed to fight against the other kingdom soldiers. Although the 4th master has a very strong potential, and also has high expectations from His Majesty, the 4th master's future achievements currently cannot be confirmed. Not only that, but the 4th master is still young, so there is still a long time before he can fully mature. With the kingdom on the verge of a war, there is simply not enough time for them to wait around for the 4th master, since we're not sure how long it'll be before the kingdom either wins or loses. The kingdom will need as many strong saints as possible in order to help win the war, so it's not clear if His Majesty will help us or not. The people in the main hall continue to attempt to come up with other ways. However, despite having contemplated for an entire evening, they were still unable to come up with any workable method. The night flew by quickly under the strained atmosphere the dozen people were in. The sky had already began to brighten, it was already close to dawn. After an entire night of discussion, everyone's expressions looked exhausted. At this moment, a Changyang clan patrolman came running in, reporting to the clan leader, "There is a person named Biyao waiting outside the mansion who wishes to see you." Biyao. Changyang Ba exclaimed under his breath with a contemplative look. His eyes shined brightly as he stood up from his throne. "Quickly invite him in." "Yes, sir." The guard responded, and quickly left. Hearing the name of Biyao, Yun Tian started to tremble from where she was standing with a look of happiness. But soon that look changed into one of puzzlement. Jianshen became confused as he noticed the change in his mother's expression. He had never heard of Biyao before, however, judging from his mother's reaction, this Biyao most likely had some type of relationship with his mother. Jianshen slowly approached his mother before asking, "Mother, who is this Biyao person?" Yun Tian slowly turned around, her eyes looking at her adored son, Xiang Heir. "Mother will tell you about this in a bit." "Okay." Jianshen nodded and did not inquire any further. Not too long after, a black-robed male came in with long strides. The man had a determined look on his face and his eyes refused to stop shining with energy. Looking at the man's forehead, many different scars could be seen. Changyang Ba stopped his actions and walked up to the center of the discussion hall. He greeted and smiled, "Brother Biyao, I can't believe it's been 20 years since we last met. How have you been?" The middle-aged man named Biyao greeted back and said, "I've been okay." He paused for a moment, his gaze stopping on Jianshen and his mother, before continuing, "It's probably better if I just get straight to the point. I've come this time under the Emperor's orders. At the same time, I've come to transmit his orders." Hearing this, Changyan Ba's face became solemn as he asked, "Brother Biyao, could this concern Xiang Heir as well?" Biyao nodded his head, "That's right, His Majesty has allowed your Changyang Xiang Tian to be escorted far away from Lor City. Only by doing this will the conflict between Changyang Mansion and the Huayun sect be temporarily abated." Changyang Ba furrowed his eyebrows together. In his heart, he did not want to follow along with this solution. Biyao continued, "The trouble this time really is a bit too great. Qingming Xiang is Huayun sect's only son, and he's a talented person that will eventually become Huayun sect's next leader. For Changyang Xiang Tian to have cut off Qingming Xiang's right arm destroyed him without question. Thus, the Huayun sect will definitely not let this matter drop lightly. The Huayun sect has 2 heaven saint masters, people that the Changyang clan cannot afford to fight with. Although His Majesty also has 2 other heaven saint masters by his side, but with trouble brewing at the borders of the country, then the Joseon kingdom will be involved in a war soon enough. By that point, His Majesty cannot afford to get on the bad side of the Huayun sect. It is only with Changyang Xiang Tian being escorted out of Lor City and under the control of His Majesty that this situation can be solved temporarily, and fix the issues within the Joseon kingdom. Could it be that there's really no other way? Jian Chen's second aunt, Yu Fengyan asked. None. Biyao shook his head, his tone filled with complete certainty. Bai Yuntian's expression turned ashen, and she said in a trembling voice, however, the people outside are dangerous. Xiang Er's strength is still weak, he'll definitely suffer through a lot of hardships. Biyao gave a profound look at the Jianchen sitting next to Bai Yuntian and said, one must suffer hardships in their life while upholding their dignity as a person. It is only after they suffer through thick and thin that they can mature into an independent person. You both pamper him too much, this won't do him any favors, it's actually harming him. Hearing Biyao, a few of the gathered people nodded their heads in agreement. There was a great deal of logic within his words. Changyangba still looked hesitant at this idea. Jianchen swept his gaze over his surroundings. He knew that this was his chance to strike out for an advantage and said, Father, just let me leave. I am confident that I can cope with anything that I'll encounter in the future. Moreover, I really want to go outside to travel the world. Clan leader, since the fourth master had originally planned to leave the mansion, what Biyao said is correct. This may be the only way to solve the conflict between the two groups. With this method, the fourth master will definitely learn a lot. Even if the fourth master is a genius that surpasses others, his experience is still what matters most. Changbai said. Changyangba helplessly sighed and said, fine. Since Changbai also agrees to this suggestion, then Xiang Er will leave Lore City and experience the outside world for a while. I'll let a few devoted guards leave with Xiang Er to keep him safe outside. Once he heard that guards would be dispatched to protect him, Jian Chen's brows couldn't help but knit together as he said, Father, there's no need to dispatch guards. I want to go adventure outside alone. Xiang Er, going out by yourself is still far too dangerous. At the very least, please take some guards to go with you in case you come across any trouble. Bai Yuntian held on to Jian Chen's hands in concern. With the current matters, she was powerless to change the decision and so she could only try to accept this decision calmly. No need, mother. I don't want to bring guards out, if that happens, I'll be too easy to target. I think that going out alone is easier. Jian Chen's attitude was extremely firm. In reality, in his opinion, having a few guards by his side was a type of burden. In addition, once outside, he couldn't always be as cautious with conserving his strength as he was at home. He still had many secrets that he couldn't let anyone in his family know of. Chapter 67. By clan Changyangba wanted to reject Jian Chen's proposal of going alone, but Jian Chen had been adamant in his decision. So in the end, Changyangba had no choice but to agree. After the discussions were over, Biyao said, from what I heard in the royal palace, the Huayun sect has already received the news and is moving towards Lore City at top speed. They'll be at Lore City by late afternoon at the very latest, so it would be best if you send Changyang Xiang Tian away from Lore City as soon as possible. Otherwise, it'll be too late by nighttime. Everyone's faces became solemn once more. Then, Changbai stood up and said, then let's have the fourth master gather his things before I take him away on the eagle beast. Soon after that, everyone started to leave the main hall. Xiang Er, please go to mother's room, there are matters we must discuss. Bai Yuntian said as she walked towards her room. After entering her room, Bai Yuntian pulled Jian Chen with her to sit with him. By this point, Bai Yuntian's cheeks had tears streaming down her face. She knew in her heart that after Jian Chen left Changyang Mansion, it would be a very long time before the mother and son would be able to meet again. Life in the Tianyuan continent was complex, and Jian Chen didn't know what hardships he would go through or what unfortunate events would happen to him, so this was possibly the last time the mother and son would ever see each other again. Xiang Er, you are no longer young in age and you'll soon be leaving this place. So there are things that mother should tell you first. Bai Yuntian's tears shone like sparkling crystals as they dripped from her face. Xiang Er, didn't you ever think why it was strange that you didn't have a grandfather or grandmother? Jian Chen nodded his head without making a sound. Bai Yuntian continued to say, Xiang Er, your mother is actually not from the Jessen kingdom. My homelands originate from one of three biggest empires, the Karl Empire. Not only that, but my Bai clan has been a powerful family that goes back for over 1,000 years. It had a powerful influence stronger than that of the Huayun sect and resided in the king's city Minghua City. Your grandfather was a powerful saint ruler, while you have 4 other great elders who have reached the heaven saint master level and hold high positions in our Bai clan. Bai Yin Tian sighed, it's a shame good things don't last forever. While your mother was still young, your grandfather received a letter and never returned, leaving behind no information at all. 20 years after the disappearance of your grandfather, the 4 elders of the clan sent 2 people to look for him. 2 days after their search began, however, an astonishing piece of information was reported. The 2 that were sent out had been killed in the countryside. Bai Yin Tian's face was full of sorrow after saying that. This piece of information was like a bolt of lightning coming from a clear sky. While the 2 elders were only at the Heaven Saint Master level, they were still considered as some of the strongest in the Tianyuan continent, so it was inconceivable to think that they could be killed. The elders didn't even have time to run, and so to this day, the Bai clan are still clueless on what enemy could be strong enough to have such a grudge towards our Bai clan. Your grandfather may have encountered something similar as well. Unfortunately, our mysterious enemies didn't even give us time to catch our breath. On the very same night of the murders, a huge group of mysterious men invaded our Bai clan. They were all very strong, and the remaining 2 elders were unable to repel them. Ultimately, they got killed. Without the powerful elders, there were no longer any strong people left to protect us. At that moment, some loyal members of the clan tried to help a group of us escape the massacre, but in the end, only your mother and uncle were left. It was only after your uncle and I hid in a family home that we were able to escape from Minghua City with our lives. After hiding for a few hours, we turned our heads and immediately left via a mercenary caravan heading towards the Jessen kingdom. The tears were still flowing from Bai Yun Tian's face as she cried in deep sorrow, Xiang Heir, at that moment of greatness, we had over 1,000 members to our name. But to this day, all that remains is your uncle and the 2 of us. You must remember that you not only have the blood of the Changyang clan in you, but the blood of the Bai clan as well. You must carry on the Bai clan's name, so please remember to protect yourself. Do you understand? Jianshan nodded his head in silence as his heart churned with emotions. For a very long time he couldn't calm himself, since the news his mother had told him had struck the very core of his emotions. After some time, Jianshan finally calmed himself down and said, Mother, could it be that we still haven't figured out our mysterious enemy's identity or how strong they are? Bai Yin Tian shook her head, I have no idea. Your mother and uncle were still young at the time and so we didn't understand much. So we had no idea who they were. If anyone knew, it would be the elders, but they're dead now. Afterwards, Bai Yun Tian fished out a red embroidered pouch and looked at it as if it was bringing back old memories. Xiang Heir, before your grandfather disappeared, he gave me this red pouch and said it was a family heirloom passed down from generation to generation. By this point, it's well over 1,000 years old, so please take care of it. Those mysterious men had most likely exterminated our Bai clan for treasures like this. Jian Chen's eyes looked at the embroidered red pouch and said, Mother, what exactly is in this then? There's only a small piece of fur that's smaller than the size of one's palms inside. Your mother has no idea what it's used for. Bai Yin Tian placed the red pouch onto Jian Chen's hands and said, Xiang Heir, even if this pouch only has fur in it, it's still a family heirloom, so there's no way this piece of fur is not simple at all. Right now you are the Bai clan's only hope, so passing down the family heirloom should be a given. I hope you protect yourself well, but it's best if you keep this pouch hidden at all costs. Although it'll be unlikely to come across a person that recognizes it, it's better to be safe than sorry. Jianshan silently nodded as he took the red pouch. Dong dong dong. At that moment, a knock was heard on the door as a voice called out from the other side. Quickly wiping away her tears, Bai Yun Tian called out, Who is it? There was no sound outside the door for some time. Eventually, a voice said, Sister, it's me. Hearing that familiar voice, one that he had not too long ago heard, Jianshan stared blankly at the door. It was the man from the palace, Bai Dao. Hearing the voice, Bai Yuntian looked puzzled before saying, "Come in." The doors opened as a black-robed man slowly walked in. It was precisely Bai Dao. Bai Yuntian slowly stood up from her chair as she looked at him with a pained expression. "Brother, it has been 20 years since you last saw me. I had thought that you had already forgotten about me." Jian Chen's stare hardened. From the fact that his mother called him her brother, he could already tell that the middle-aged man in front of him was his uncle. Bai Dao sighed. "Sister, I'm sorry, your older brother was wrong to not visit you during the last 20 years. In truth, your brother never forgot about you, it was just that the burdens your brother was carrying were too heavy to bear. Vengeance for our Bai clan will definitely be carried out by me. Sister. Your brother will live out the rest of his life for the sole purpose of revenge." Bai Yuntian sighed as well, before turning her head to look at Jian Chen. "Xiang heir, this is your uncle, Bai Dao." "Uncle." Jian Chen spoke. This was the first time he had uttered the word, as well as the first time he had seen him up close. Bai Dao sized up Jian Chen before offering a smile. "Xiang Tian, I have heard about you, word of your accomplishments has resounded through the capital, and have even been whispered of inside the royal palace. You are truly worthy of being a descendant of our Bai clan. I eagerly anticipate the day when you have grown strong and honorable. Do not disappoint me." After talking, Bai Dao immediately grew solemn once more as he faced Bai Yuntian. "Sister, I know you hate to see Xiang Tian leave, but there is no other way. As it stands now, the Changyang clan cannot oppose the Huayun sect, but if Xiang Tian leaves, the situation will improve dramatically for both the clan and Xiang Tian. Letting Xiang Tian stay in the mansion will bring no good benefits. It may even cause the Changyang clan to end up like our Bai clan. Right now we just need to smuggle Xiang Tian away before nightfall. Otherwise, he won't be able to leave, even if you agreed to let him go." Bai Yuntian nodded her head slowly. Since the emperor wasn't willing to help them publicly right now, how could she not understand this reasoning? Afterwards, the tear-streaked Bai Yuntian helped Jian Chen gather some clothes and items before escorting him out. As the two of them arrived at the rear courtyard, they found Jian Chen's aunts, his father, and Chang Bai were there waiting for him. Right behind them stood a gigantic and majestic eagle beast. Changyang, who grabbed Jian Chen's arm, his expression downtrodden as he spoke with concern. "Fourth brother, you'd better be careful in the outside world, understand?" Jian Chen nodded before saying with a smile, "Don't worry, big brother, I will definitely protect myself. But after I go, you'd better not goof off. You must continue practicing the battle techniques." Changyang, who nodded his head fiercely and said, "I will, fourth brother. Your elder brother's lack of strength has burdened you. From now on, I will strive even harder to cultivate and grow stronger." Jian Chen's second sister, Changyang Mingyu, walked up to him and gave him a spice bag. "Fourth brother, your second sister made you a safety charms and wishes you safe travels. You'd better wear it." Right now, Changyang Mingyu was already 18. She had become a tall yet slender beautiful girl that was capable of causing an entire city to fight for her. Jian Chen took the safety charm from her. Although he knew that the charm wouldn't provide any substantial amount of defense, it was still a gift from his sister that was filled with concern. "Thank you, second sister. I will definitely take care of this charm," he said with a smile. Changyang Ba walked forward with a ring and spoke. "Xiang heir, this is a space ring your father had long since prepared for you. This was meant to be your graduation present from Kargath Academy, but I don't believe you need to wait that long for it anymore. Your father will give you this space ring. There is already something I have prepared for you inside." "Thank you, father." With a grateful look, Jian Chen took the space ring. "Xiang heir, the space ring is absolutely a precious item within the Tian Yuan continent. In order to avoid unnecessary troubles, don't reveal your space ring to anyone, even under the most dire circumstances," Changyang Ba said. Jian Chen nodded. "Father, Xiang heir understands." Chapter 68, White Cloud City. After everyone had finished talking, Jianshan left with Changbai on the back of the eagle beast and immediately departed from Lore City. Sitting on top of the eagle beast, Jianshan stared at the receding city walls with a complicated look on his face. It's been over 15 years since he came into this world, and he has only left the confines of the mansion and Lore City twice. The first time he had left Lore City was to go to Kargath Academy, but this time, the reason was no longer the same. Jianshan understood that after leaving, he wouldn't see his family again for a very long time, and would have to fend for himself. In this dangerous environment known as the Tianyuan continent, Jianshan could only rely on himself. Jianshan personally didn't think he would be able to see his family again, but he had read from the books that this world was dominated by the strong. The Tianyuan continent was a lot more dangerous than his previous world, and while he had decent strength for his age, there was no guarantee for what may happen. Changbai sat on the neck of the eagle beast and stared at Jianshan. Fourth master, starting from today you'll be on your own. Please be careful as you travel through the Tianyuan continent. I know what must be done, Changbai. Jianshan said without turning his head. Changbai paused to look at Jianshan with a curious look before sighing as he had no more to say. The eagle beast flew high in the sky, thousands of meters above the ground, streaking across the sky like a ray of light. With the whistle of the wind blowing loudly, both Changbai and Jianshan had their hair and clothes flapping rapidly in the wind. The eagle beast soared over the walls of countless tiny villages before finally the eagle beast slowly came to a stop, in midair in front of the walls of a great city. Looking down to see the city, Jianshan asked, Changbai, you should just drop me off here. Hearing this, Changbai looked down to see the tiny city before nodding his head, if you say so. Immediately, the eagle beast flew down towards the ground under his control. Jianshan hopped off of the magical beast before saying to Changbai, Changbai, you should hurry on home, I'm sure the Huayun sect has already arrived at the Changyang mansion. Changbai started to ascend with his eagle beast. Fourth master, please take care. Jianshan waved goodbye to Changbai and turned around to walk towards the city in front of him. Changbai hesitated as he sat on the eagle beast and watched Jianshan's back go further and further away. It was only after he had disappeared when Changbai said, Fourth master, I hope we see each other soon, you've always surprised me after all. The eagle beast started to flap its wings and flew into the sky, blowing dust everywhere. Soon, Changbai flew off into the air towards the direction of the Changyang mansion. The sun has already long since set into the horizon. With the colors of nightfall rapidly approaching, Jianshan walked towards the small city with a group of people. However, while he was walking on foot, many of them were traveling via carriages being pulled by magical beasts. Jianshan's appearance had naturally made the other travelers curious and made many other mercenaries become alert. But when they realized how young Jianshan was, they immediately lost their alertness. Jianshan sized up the mercenaries riding on top of the magical beasts. Some of them ranged from 20 years old to 50 years old, some wore armor, some leather, and some just wore regular clothes. When Jianshan walked closer to them, however, he could smell the scent of blood. To the experienced Jianshan, he knew that these mercenaries had been baptized with the blood of their enemies already. 10 miles wasn't that far for Jianshan, and so after some time, he saw the 20-meter-high city walls. Jianshan didn't know how old the walls were, but the constant battle with time seemed to have left its mark on them. Visible scars could be seen on the walls, but near the gate written with bold calligraphy were the words, White Cloud City. Hey, halt. What is your purpose here? Barring Jianshan's path was a guard of the city. Jianshan gave a small smile and handed the guard a few gold coins and said, Brother, I am merely a mercenary who came to White Cloud City for a mission. The guard took the gold coins discreetly and smiled brightly at him. So you have a mission, then I won't take up your precious time, go on in. After entering the city, Jianshan walked 3 kilometers down the road, and arrived at a very busy part of the city. Although it was sunset, the street was still bustling with people rushing around from store to store and engaged in every sort of business. The streets were paved with rocks that seemed to shine brightly. With the road so evenly paved, even if a caravan ran full speed across it, the passengers wouldn't feel the slightest jolt. Hungry, Jianshan rubbed his stomach gingerly as he walked towards the nearest restaurant. It had already been a full day since he had eaten, so his stomach had already started to protest. "Welcome, guest." Under the enthusiastic welcome of a waiter, Jianshan walked towards an empty table and sat down. "Honored guest, are you here for a meal or to stay for the night?" The waiter was a young man in his 20s, and had a cordial smile on his face. Jianshan looked at the other rowdy mercenaries within the restaurant and said, "Even those who are staying for the night require a meal. What is there to eat here?" The waiter smiled and introduced Jianshan to a wide variety of dishes. However, every single one of the dishes mentioned were all the most expensive dishes. The waiter had long since noticed Jianshan was wearing quite luxurious clothes and thought him out to be the son of a wealthy clan. But Jianshan didn't care for the prices of the dishes and instead lazily chose one out to eat. After eating his fill, Jianshan paid for a medium-sized room for the night and immediately entered his room to rest. The restaurant was not a very high-quality one, so the medium-sized room was not too luxurious. Compared to the Changyang mansion, the difference was like comparing the heavens to the earth. The room offered a hardwood bed with a single table and a few chairs, but apart from that, there was nothing more. On a side note, the room had been cleaned nicely. Jianshan had never been picky, and so this room had already satisfied him enough. After closing his door, Jianshan walked towards his bed and took out the space ring his father had given him before leaving and looked at the contents. The space ring deserved to be called a high-quality treasure as there were many objects within it. With an internal storage of up to 100 cubic meters, there were a pile of items stacked in the middle of it. While the ring wasn't full, almost every inch of the floor had been covered by items. Amongst a pile of items, there were 1,000 purple coins that sparkled dazzlingly along with another few thousand gold coins stacked in another pile. There were even small piles of monster cores. Around 40 of them were Class 2 monster cores, 10 of them were Class 3 monster cores, and only one of them was a Class 4 monster core. Seeing how many items were stored inside the space ring, Jianshan felt very warm inside. Although it wasn't by any means a large amount of items, they all served a practical use for Jianshan's needs. With this much, it truly showed how much Changyang Ba cared for his son. Stuffing the space ring back into his bosom, Jianshan clearly remembered the words of his father. Until he was strong enough, he didn't dare to reveal his ring to anyone since it was such a precious item on the Tianyuan continent. Although there weren't a small amount of people who had a space ring, they were all strong members of influential and wealthy clans and could easily protect themselves from danger. Climbing onto the bed, Jianshan took a few monster cores from within the space ring and closed his eyes as he started to cultivate using the energy from within the monster cores. As usual, Jianshan started to absorb the energy within the monster core at a frightening rate. If anyone were to see him now, then they would see the monster core emit a weak amount of light as the energy within started to flow into him like a thick stream. To the naked eye, the energy was surrounding Jianshan's body while the monster core was rapidly shrinking in Jianshan's hands. Ever since Jianshan had broken through to become a saint, there was an unfathomable mystery in his dantian in the form of an azure and violet glow. Because of that, his path of cultivation had become much more difficult than before, and although his absorption rate of the world essence was several times faster than before, he could only absorb a pathetic 1% of it all. The rest of it was being taken by his dantian. So for now he would have to absorb the energy from the monster cores, but if he kept this up, he wouldn't be able to keep up with the consumption rate. After 2 hours, Jianshan had already absorbed a lot of the energy within the monster cores, but Jianshan continued to take monster core after monster core out of his space ring and continued to cultivate. He still had plenty of Class 1 monster cores and a few Class 2 monster cores which would last him a couple of days at the very least. Fortunately, his father had also gave him 10 Class 3 monster cores and a single Class 4 monster core. On the second day, the sun had already reached a high point in the sky before Jianshan finally finished cultivating. By this point, all of his Class 1 monster cores were essentially gone. After realizing the dwindling amount of monster cores in his space belt, Jianshan gave a long sigh of hopelessness. The 2 glows within his dantian had really made him feel quite distressed. Calming himself, Jianghu departed from both his room and the restaurant to mingle with the crowded streets. The morning sky was quite clear, and the fiery sun had not yet started to increase the temperature of the weather by a large amount. With a warm ray of light, everyone felt quite comfortable instead. On the busy streets, a few mercenaries were hurrying along while a few peddlers were slowly cruising along. Jianghu eventually arrived at the mercenary union. He had already put in some thought about which job he wanted to take, so he would first need to become a mercenary. Chapter 69. First-class mercenary throughout the Tianyuan continent. In each city of every country, the mercenary union would always be in the core of the city. And right next to the mercenary union would always be a few small banks. White Cloud City was only a second-class city, but it covered a large area of land. Jianghu had walked for an entire 30 minutes before finally arriving at a bustling street at the center of the city. Right in front of him was a 20-meter-tall building that towered over the other buildings. This was the mercenary union. The mercenary union's building was rather large and was constructed to resemble a giant magical beast. At the entrance of the building, a constant flow of all sorts of mercenaries went in and out. Jianghu entered the mercenary union, and although this was the first time he had been to a place like this. However, since he had wanted to become an experienced mercenary, he had read up on about stuff like this in the academy library. The mercenary union had many people inside, and the business window had a long queuing line. All of the sales windows were filled with people trying to hand in their missions. Yet in the deepest part of the building, there was a mercenary enrollment window with a cold and desolate ambience. Jianghu walked up to that window and said, "Hello, I would like to enlist as a mercenary." The person in charge of this window was an old man who looked to be around 60 years old. Although he was old, his entire face was red and his eyes shined brightly with emotion. The elderly man indifferently looked at Jianghu and flatly said, "To become a mercenary, one first must be a saint. Have you reached that level yet?" "I have already reached the saint level," Jianghu answered. The elder sized Jianghu up before handing over a piece of paper and asking, "What's your name?" Jianghu. Jianghu obviously didn't want to use the name Changyang Xiang Tian when he was trying to hide himself, so he instead used his original name from his previous life as his new moniker. "How old are you this year?" the man asked. Hearing this, Jianghu gave the question some thought. 20 years old. Jianghu couldn't possibly state his true age since a saint at the age of 15 was a very rare sight in the Tianyuan continent. If he had stated his true age, it might have brought forth trouble later that he did not need. Although many people knew how talented Jianghu was in Kargath Academy, only a few people like the headmaster and the vice-headmaster knew his true age. A 20-year-old was the normal age for one to be a saint, and since his physical growth had long since outstripped the others, no one would think otherwise if he said he was 20. With his current appearance, there was almost no difference between a regular 20-year-old and himself. "What degree of strength have you reached?" The man began to write on the piece of paper with a pen. "Primary saint." Jianghu said. The rest of the process to become a mercenary was rather simple. After paying the tax of 1 silver coin, Jianghu had officially become a mercenary. He took his mercenary badge, which was that of the lowest rank since he was only a primary saint. After collecting his badge, Jianghu didn't bother to stay behind at the mercenary union. He instead quickly left the building, and asked for directions to a medicine shop. Although the Tianyuan continent had radiant saint masters who could heal a wide variety of injuries, their numbers were incredibly small. Because of this, the status of any single radiant saint master was very high, especially for mercenaries, who would be hard-pressed to be able to invite a radiant saint master into their group. Only the biggest and strongest groups could successfully invite one. Those who were alone or weren't strong enough would find it impossible to enjoy the benefits a radiant saint master would bring unless they paid extensive amounts of money. With an uncountable amount of mercenaries on the Tianyuan continent, there were also an equally uncountable amount of injured people every day. Since the supply of radiant saint masters did not meet the demand of those who needed them, a new method of using drugs and herbs was created to combat injuries. Using these medicines was vastly inferior to the healing capabilities of a radiant saint master, but it was widely accepted by mercenaries. This was because aside from the high-grade drugs, the normal medicines were very cheap. The medicine store wasn't small and was crowded inside. It was not at all like the mercenary union, which had soundproofed walls all around. While in the mercenary union, all of the mercenaries there would loudly shout amongst each other to be heard, in the medicine store, people could easily converse with each other. The medicine store had many long lines of people. After sweeping a glance around the shop, Jian Chen finally found a line with relatively few people and waited. "Might I ask what you want to order?" Finally it was Jian Chen's turn. He was enthusiastically greeted by the person behind the counter. "I'll need a few herbs, do you have them in stock?" Jian Chen asked. The assistant looked at Jian Chen with an odd stare. This was the first time he had seen a person not come in to buy medicine for their wounds. Instead, this person was buying herbs. Despite the curiosity he had towards Jian Chen, the assistant replied, "Of course we sell them. I don't know what the honored customer wants, but whatever is in the store is for sale. I need some Chilan grass, rubbing grass, sweet grass, skeleton grass, sawtooth grass, antelope flower, root flower, lilies and turtle tubers. Do you have these?" Jian Chen named almost 10 different types of herbs. The assistant immediately nodded. "We do, these herbs are very common and are not pricey at all. We have them all, but I don't know how much the honored customer wants." Jian Chen had a happy smile on his face. He took out a gold coin and placed it onto the counter as he said, "Give me a few of every item." These herbs were all extremely common goods. A single gold coin was enough to buy a cartful of them. Seeing the gold coin on the counter, the man smiled brightly. "Okay, please wait for one moment, honored guest. I'll bring them to you in a moment." With that said, he entered the back room to gather the materials. After paying for the herbs he needed, Jian Chen left the store and headed outside of the city. He arrived 10 miles outside of the city walls, and entered into the small forest. There, he dug a few mounds of earth and plucked some tree leaves. He then stored them within his space belt and walked back to White Cloud City. After returning to White Cloud City, Jian Chen purchased a new set of ordinary clothes and ducked into an uninhabited alleyway that was hidden by the general populace. After looking left and right to check if the coast was clear, he took out a small bunch of each herb he had bought earlier. He first grinded the herbs up into a fine powder using his hands and feet, before mixing it with the water he collected. Adding to the mixture some of the soft mud and leaves, he grinded it into powder as well. He continued to mix it before squeezing out some of the residual juice. Jian Chen took the result of this juice and immediately smeared it onto his face. Quickly, Jian Chen lifted his head. The complete transformation of his face could clearly be seen. At this moment, Jian Chen's looked entirely different. Even a person who was familiar with his appearance wouldn't be able to recognize him now. For all intents and purposes, Jian Chen was now a completely different person. His previously handsome looks had become average, and even his eyebrows and eyelashes had been altered to become shorter. The only features that hadn't changed were his pair of alluring eyes and his weak-looking figure. Jian Chen didn't stop there. The silver light wind sword appeared in his hands. He suddenly placed the sword on the back of his waist as his waist-length hair blowing slightly into the air. With a silver flash of light, the light wind sword quickly cut through his long hair with a speed that was almost hard to see with the naked eye. His hair was now at his shoulders. He changed into a new set of clothes from his previously luxurious set of clothes made from hand-spun silk. It was quite the change going from the finest silk to coarse leather. By this point, there was nothing about Jian Chen that would remind even those who knew him best of the original Jian Chen. Jian Chen took another few moments to ensure he hadn't overlooked anything to perfect his new appearance. Satisfied, he immediately burned his old clothes in a fire and exited the alley. Once again entering the mercenary union, Jian Chen walked towards the mission place. The mission hall in the mercenary union split its missions into 5 grades, S, A, B, C, and D. The highest grade was S, and the lowest was D. At the same time, the mercenaries were also split into these same 5 categories. At the moment, Jian Chen was only a D-ranked mercenary, and so he could only take on D-ranked missions. A mercenary's rank was determined by the amount of missions accomplished, their honor and strength. D-ranked mercenaries had to be at least saints, while C-ranked mercenaries had the power of great saints at the very minimum. With this system, S-ranked mercenaries had to reach the strength and honor of Earth Saint Masters. Even if one had the same strength as an Earth Saint Master, if they didn't have the same amount of reputation, then they wouldn't be considered an S-ranked mercenary. Therefore, this mercenary grading system had no shortcuts. D-ranked missions were bountiful, but the majority of them were very boring. The majority of them were about finding lost items, or to help a store buy and deliver their items to another store. None of the missions were of any interest to Jian Chen. Right now, Jian Chen only wanted a mission that would let him leave the Jessen kingdom because he knew the Huayun sect was a major power in the kingdom. Although he had completely changed his looks, there was no guarantee that a person wouldn't discover his real identity and set off the Huayun sect's pursuit to capture him. Just in case he accidentally revealed himself to the Huayun sect by mistake, it would be best for him to leave the Jessen kingdom to a place where the Huayun sect had no power. Unfortunately, very few D-ranked missions allowed a mercenary to travel in between countries. Most missions like that were for the higher-ranked mercenaries and were usually never distributed to a D-ranker. So when Jian Chen had looked at the entire mission list for D-ranking mercenaries, he didn't see a single mission that would take him outside the country. Inwardly sighing, Jian Chen left the mercenary union. If he wanted to leave the Jessen kingdom, he would need to rely on the cover of caravans. Otherwise, if he were to travel alone, he would be assaulted by a group of robbers that even he would most likely have trouble with. But even if he didn't meet any robbers, the border fortress was a place Jian Chen wouldn't be able to bypass with ease. You're tuning in to the Biyao's Wuxia Chronicles YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.